Good evening and welcome to the Bellingham City Council regular meeting. Today is Monday, July 13th, 2026. I'm going to call the meeting to order and we will begin with roll call.
Holly Huthman.
Here.
Dan Hamill.
Here.
Skip Williams.
Here.
Lisa Anderson.
Here.
Michael Lilliquist.
Here.
Jace Cotton.
Here.
Hannah Stone.
Here.
All council members are present.
Thank you very much. So the Bellingham City Council meets all requirements of the State of Washington Open Public Meetings Act. We'll begin this evening with the land acknowledgement. Before we begin, we acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lummi, Nooksack, Samish, and Semiahmoo people who have cared for and tended this land since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We pay respect to their elders, both past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. The Bellingham City Council provides Spanish interpretation at all regular evening meetings. Interpretation can be accessed by in-person attendees by utilizing the headsets that are at the front of the room. Remote viewers can log on to cob.org/CC Zoom and click on the language icon at the bottom of the screen to listen in Spanish.
El Ayuntamiento de Bellingham ofrece interpretación al español en todas sus reuniones vespertinas ordinarias. Los asistentes presenciales pueden acceder a la interpretación utilizando los auriculares ubicados al frente de la sala. Quienes deseen participar en forma remota pueden conectarse a cob.org/cczoom y hacer clic en el icono de idioma en la parte inferior de la pantalla para escuchar en español.
Just to let you know, our next council meeting will be in 2 weeks. It will be held on July 27th. So with that, we will begin this evening with a public hearing. So this is Agenda Bill 24970. This is a public hearing to consider an ordinance relating to land use and zoning, amending multiple chapters in the Bellingham Municipal Code, to adopt permanent zoning regulations to eliminate minimum automobile parking requirements and establish consistent bicycle parking standards citywide. This draft ordinance proposes permanent zoning regulations to eliminate minimum automobile parking requirements and establish consistent bicycle parking standards citywide. This parking reform reflects the city's current priorities, removes obstacles to housing production, reduces environmental impacts, and supports climate goals. A Type 6 public review process is required for permanent amendments to the parking regulations in the Bellingham Municipal Code. Following 2 extensions of an interim parking ordinance, originally adopted in January of last year, 2025, the Planning Commission recommended approval of the proposed code changes at a public hearing on June 4th of this year, 2026. So we'll begin this item first with Blake Lyon, who is the Planning and Community Development Director.
Thank you and good evening, council members, mayor, public. Thanks for coming. I'm going to talk a little bit about the why, and then I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth and talk a little bit about the how, if we will. And when I want to start this evening's comments with a little bit of a kind of a recount of what got us here. You all recall the mayor's executive order in November of 2024 that identified about 16 different administrative initiatives and 3 different legislative pieces. And one of those was parking reform, and it really was honing in on the ability to help address and take out some of the regulatory hurdles that were causing impediments for our housing, in particular housing production, and just the overall numbers that we need to see in this community to help address a wide range and variety of issues. And so one of the things that came out as a part of that conversation was really kind of the overall abundance of supply that we have not only in this community, but nationwide. There's some statistics out there that I offer up that we have as many as 6 parking spaces per vehicle in this country. And so we have this overabundant supply, and looking at different opportunities around the city to find where we can leverage the ability to get more compact urban infill development. So you may recall this slide that was part of that conversation that looks at a static image of the Bellis Fair Mall and the underutilization of that. I scoured back through both our historical aerials, Google Earth, all these different images that we could find, and this was a picture that was taken in 2008 when it was the most populated parking that I could find. And you can see that this area up here in the upper left-hand corner that I've kind of put the red oval around, many of you all may have known that more recently as kind of the motorcycle training ground area. And every single year I looked at that photograph, there was not a single car parked in that lot. And then if you look over here, those that have taken the opportunity to go out there now know we have a new Chick-fil-A that's out there. So we have a wide range of different uses that have come up and opportunities where we have an overabundance of parking available. This is, by and large, what this has looked like for the last 40 years, where it's been underutilized. I'm happy to say that now we have this particular project. This came out of a photograph that Rachel Schulwetler of the Bellingham Herald, it's actually in today's paper, if you didn't have a chance to see it. And she highlights 3 different projects, and I reached out with her permission to utilize those projects for a few of my comments this evening. But this is 129 permanently affordable senior housing units that are going on this particular property and 80 childcare units. And I would offer to say that many of these probably would not have happened but for making that. The city came in, acquired the land from the mall owners, offered it up. Opportunity Council came in and has built this. So we have now, again, 129 additional units, 80 childcare units, where otherwise a fallow parking lot used to sit. The next example in this, many of you may recall some of the metal recycling operations that Parbury had down in Old Town, and some of this area sat really underutilized, and kind of adjacent to our downtown, adjacent to our waterfront, and started seeing a lot of this. But for the city's efforts, but for the private developers' efforts, and a variety of other folks, we now have Ironworks, which is set to open up. That is an opportunity to get additional 80 units on that particular site. What you may not realize by looking at just the new building that's there is that this particular project went through several different iterations before we landed on this one. The first of which, if memory serves me correctly, is when we had the different parking requirements for the Old Town Urban Village, and it required parking on that site. And what we saw was a 3-story parking structure with 3 stories of residential units above. And so you had effectively 30 units on this particular project site, and now we have 84 that have been constructed. Now there are additional parking spaces that are on this site. You don't see them in this particular photo. And I should also note that the property owner does own multiple blocks, and so they've got the opportunity to provide some opportunities for off-site parking should they choose to, or should they feel like they have a need for that. And these are market rate and some middle-income rental units. Some of you may recall kind of the south end of State Street, right near the roundabout. And this was the former site where most recently where the county used it for emergency winter shelters. It was called the Creamery for a while there. This is now a market rate condominium project that has almost 100 units that's there. It too has some on-site parking available to it. This is an opportunity where there's a new future home buyers organization that's partnering with Janicki Residential to do first-time home buyer assistance. And so you can talk about an opportunity to get initial home ownership opportunities that are anticipated maybe in the high twos, low 300,000s when they hit the market. So again, trying to look at the range of things from permanently affordable to market rate rental to individual home ownership opportunities. And again, these are from the Bellingham Herald. Now I know that there's been some conversation about, well, what if they don't provide any parking? So here's an example of a project that's in the Sandwich Way Urban Village. If you see kind of right in the middle of this photograph, this is Sandwich Way, then you have Bill McDonald Parkway. There's transit lines. In fact, it's the blue line, the GO line that serves both of that. The subject property is what I've identified there in the red rectangle. And I put on the screen here just for an example of what's within proximity. So you've got transit stops both on Bill McDonald Parkway and on Sandwich Way. You've got grocery store in Hagen's, which is a little less than 500 feet away. You got two different pharmacies, as you all know. We get kind of the CVS and the Walgreens, always in close proximity to one another. Coffee shops, hardware stores, over a dozen different restaurants, and a variety of kind of goods and services. It's also to mention that this project, as it's at least being contemplated right now, is additional studio units in told. And so we know that from our perspective, the state has passed Senate Bill 5184, which does not allow local governments to require parking for units that are under 1,200 square feet in size. So likely if this project is to move forward, it would result in needing to comply with that depending on the timing of that. But again, taking a step back and looking at some of these, this project, when it was originally came into the city in 2023, was 12 units with 14 on-site parking spaces. There's a little rendering down there. You can see a little bit of the site plan. You can see over here on the right-hand side, this is where it was being proposed. 2/3 of that site was parking, and only about 1/3 of it was the building. And then they looked ahead in 2025 and they redid some plans and they went to 35 units, and then they started playing around with a 40-unit project and started thinking about some on-site parking spaces and kind of working through. And then Rachel put out an article, if you saw it a few days back on July 10th, which talked about this particular iteration of the project, which will ultimately end up at 54 if they choose to pursue this project. It's still in a pre-application phase, so we don't know what the final result may be. But what I can tell you is it's a far cry from the 54 to the 12. So you got 42 units that arguably, no, I can't say will happen because we don't know what's ultimately going to get approved on that site. But again, it's all about providing opportunities for that housing. And I want to leave you with one final image with my comments. This is our housing tracking numbers. So we've tracked it for the last 26 years. You can see on that list, and I took the opportunity to put a red line, and that red line indicates the House Bill 1220, which is our housing for all planning tool that the state requires us. And you all know, you've seen it in the Bellingham plan, where we have housing target allocations. And for the city of Bellingham, that equates, and I won't go through all the math this evening, but that equates to approximately 850 units per year for the next 20 years. Over the last 26 years, we've hit that mark 7 times. That's 26% of the time that we've met that mark. Now, that is not the sole responsibility of the city. I want to be clear about that. We can do our part to address zoning, think about parking regulations, work through our process and streamlining our development opportunities. A lot of this has to do with market readiness and lending capabilities and labor availability and supply chains, and there's a whole series of why things do and don't get built. But if we are to have any hope at aspiring to getting those numbers where we need across the housing spectrum, not only affordable, but market rate and beyond, and ownership opportunities, we need to look for those opportunities to make better utilization of the land that we have available to us and continue to do that. And I would submit that in the last year and a half, when we've been doing this through the interim, last I checked, the sky hasn't fallen. We're getting projects through, we're going through, and I should also mention on this so far, that 2026 date is year to date. So we still have some time this year to work through and bring those numbers up. But we want to continue down this path. We think that it's a good opportunity to look at ways to address the needs that we have in this community and continue to strive to do better than we have in generations past. So I'm going to stop there, turn it over to Elizabeth. She's going to walk us through a few of the specifics, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Good evening. I'm Elizabeth Erickson with the Planning and Community Development Department as well. As Blake said, I'm just going to go through some of the details of the how and what's really being proposed tonight. I'm going to go through this relatively quickly, so I won't talk through every point on every slide, but we are more than happy to answer questions. I know you all have seen a lot of this before, as have a lot of the audience members tonight, so I'll keep it fairly brief. We're going to talk a little bit about the why that Blake just started us with, a little bit of the background, talk through what the actual regulations look like, summarize those, and just tell you a little bit about our recommendation. So Blake really gave you a lot of the kind of impacts and why we are hoping to remove our parking minimums across the city. There's a lot of information in the packet about some of the kind of history in other cities that have done this. More than happy to go into some of that as well. But as far as what we here in Bellingham have done, Blake alluded to the interim ordinance on this. We adopted that just 2 months after the mayor's executive order on housing. And so we've been under this interim ordinance since January of last year. We've extended it twice. The most recent one was just last month in order to give us time to go through this process. But we anticipate not needing that full 6 months, but we will see how tonight goes. And under that interim ordinance, it's very similar to what you see proposed today. So I'll walk through what those differences look like, but that interim ordinance did remove parking minimums across the city and enact bicycle parking minimums across the city. You can see that kind of counterbalance. And we are now moving through this Type 6 process. We went through the beginning of that with Planning Commission just recently, and they recommended what staff had brought forward with just a couple minor changes where they had increased the ratios for some of the bicycle parking categories, but otherwise it remains pretty similar to what was brought to them. So as we're bringing forward these permanent regulations, Blake alluded to SB 5184. That's a fairly significant bill that passed. I'll go through that in a little bit more detail on a later slide, but that's definitely something that will impact some of the conversation tonight, and that goes into effect in January. So we only have, about 6 months left, but before we have to be in alignment with that. We also are really focused on having a market-driven approach. Blake mentioned that we are really seeing the impact of removing parking minimums, not as removing parking by any means. Almost all of the projects that have come in are still proposing significant amounts of parking, but that we are hoping that the market will really drive how much parking is proposed by developers. And we also have done quite a bit of work and collaborated with our Public Works Department in particular on parking management and ensuring that as these changes go into effect, we're able to track what the impacts are and react to them with the tools we do have. There are a lot of different bills on this slide. I'm really not going to go through them because 5184 really was such a big change that all of these smaller things that led up to it don't make that much difference. So I'm going to skip right down to this next one and just say that a lot of the other legislation had bits and pieces which we've worked into this bill if they still apply. But 5184 comes into effect in about 6 months and has maximum amounts of parking we're allowed to require for a number of categories, but the big one is that we cannot require any parking for dwelling units that are under 1,200 square feet in size. So pretty much any multifamily project, we are not allowed to require parking for from January on out. So that's a really big change to how this conversation went when we first enacted the interim ordinance, because this bill came forward after we adopted the interim. There are also a few other kind of types of projects that we cannot require parking for or that there are kind of maximums for as well. Just really highlighting that 1,200 square feet. Most projects that are multifamily, and many of our middle housing projects are smaller than that. We also did quite a bit of work on the work plan, as I mentioned. So we explored a number of categories. There's a lot more information in the packet about this, but really working with Public Works to track a lot of information, to look at how we're managing our public parking supply and ensure that if we see unexpected consequences of these changes, we can be nimble and make updates to how we manage our public parking supply as well. So one example of that is looking at ADA parking, our accessible parking, and taking a look at how the changes we are enacting might impact the availability of that, and see if maybe we need to shift the amount of ADA parking we provide in the public right-of-way, for example. So to summarize some of the changes we're proposing in this ordinance, when you compare it to the interim ordinance, it is 90% the same as the interim ordinance, and really the intention is the same. But we had a little bit more time to really work through some of those details. And so we're still eliminating minimum automobile parking requirements across the city. That has not changed in the proposal. And we are shifting the bicycle parking requirements, which currently only apply in the urban villages before we had the interim ordinance. Excuse me. We're shifting those to apply citywide. That was also true in the interim ordinance. However, we have taken a closer look at some of those categories and ratios. And so we've added a few more categories to just get a little bit more nuance, and also increase the ratios a little bit to be in alignment with some of our peer cities as well. So there's more information in the packet that shows you some of those peer cities and research that we did and where we got those numbers from. And two of those categories are what were increased by the Planning Commission to be more in alignment with some of those cities as well. We are continuing to require ADA parking, but only as it's required as a ratio, and that's based on how the state requirements have us calculate that. And so if they choose to provide parking overall, a certain percentage of that must be accessible. The 5184 does not actually allow us to require more than that. And so in the interim, we required one ADA stall, but under 5184, we can no longer even require that one stall. That is something that the state might look at in the future. So if they change that requirement, we could look back at our code as well. And similarly, the electrical vehicle charging is also a percentage of total stalls have to be kind of EV ready, et cetera. And so those are also just in alignment with the state. We can't go beyond that. And so, excuse me, just highlighting those changes in a little bit more detail. The ordinance itself is very long because our existing code mentions parking in many, many, many places, and it's slightly different language throughout. And so what we've done is really found all of those places, crossed out what used to be there, and added a reference to the main parking section so that it all references that same section and uses the same language. And then in that section, which is at the top of the ordinance so that it's much easier to find, we've made those changes and said parking minimums are not required, but if you do require parking, I mean, if you do provide parking, here are some design requirements, and that's what that looks like. And then here are what the bicycle requirements look like. It's consistent categories and requirements across the city, and then also some design requirements there. One of the things that we are proposing in the packet that goes beyond what Planning Commission approved is staff has some proposals around increasing the ratio of electric bike charging and cargo bike spaces to really align with the fact that electric bikes are becoming much more popular. So rather than matching some of our peer cities codes that were adopted in the last 10 years, really looking forward and increasing that ratio. And so if you agree with that, what's in the packet, you will need to vote to change that because it's not built into the ordinance, because it's not what Planning Commission approved. But Planning Commission did discuss that and considered it, and then Transportation Commission discussed it a few days later and also was interested in seeing those ratios increase. So staff went back, looked at it, did some research, and have come with you to a proposal to increase those a little bit. So there's also a fix of one typo in there. So those two things are before you as a consideration to adopt as well. In these updates, there's also really explicit language that wasn't in the interim ordinance around allowing the conversion of parking. So let's say you had developed a project 20 years ago. Under those parking requirements, you had a very large parking lot that is really underutilized. We are explicitly allowing the conversion of some of those spaces. So if you choose to reduce your parking in order to develop another part of your site, you can do that. So we were kind of silent on that under the interim, and now we're being clear about that. And then we're also repealing the Fairhaven Parking District without the parking minimum requirements. That no longer applies. And then the bicycle parking requirements we have also addressed in this ordinance, and they really align with a lot of the city's goals. You had a lot of conversation last year along with the Bellingham plan about our mode shift goals and really trying to get people out of single occupancy vehicles and into more sustainable, lower emissions choices as well. And so this really aligns with that and providing more opportunity for biking. And then we also just noted that the bicycle parking that we had in the interim ordinance was based on requirements that we put together almost 20 years ago when we initially adopted those. And those were really based on Portland's requirements at the time. They have since adopted new, more stringent regulations as well. So we're really just proposing increasing those a little bit to be aligned with our times. And that's really what's referenced on this slide as well, just adjusting those and ensuring that they really meet the requirements. So there's also a whole section, for instance, on the size of the bike spaces to be really clear on what counts as a space for a bike. And I mentioned the ADA parking, so we adjusted that in the ordinance to align with what we're allowed to require under 5184. Same with EV charging. It can be voluntarily provided, but we aren't requiring more than what the state requires. We do note that there might be a few things that, as this goes into effect, we want to track and consider in the future. So really looking at our temporary and our time-restricted parking, like really all of our parking within public spaces, within our right-of-ways, street parking, those kinds of things. Being able to be nimble and responsive with that. So Public Works is really tracking that. Considering in the future parking maximums, we could do that if we wanted to. If we saw people still over parking and really not ending up using those, we could. We don't anticipate that though, since parking is expensive as noted. And then again, like I mentioned, tracking the ADA parking demand. So this is just summarizing the recommendation. Really, the ordinance before you is very similar to the interim ordinance with those changes that I outlined, but also noting that there's that attachment in the packet about the e-bikes and cargo bikes. So if you agree with that, let us know, and we can loop that into the ordinance as well. And with that, I will open it or hand it back to you all to start the public hearing.
If I may just make two more comments. One is, as we've been going through this last year and a half with the interim and working with the development community, looking at the suite of different options that are put forth in the mayor's executive order, the two that are most notable that we've heard from the development community are the changes to the MFTE, the multifamily tax exemption program, and the parking reductions. And so we just wanted to highlight that. The other thing, and I hesitated whether or not to bring this up because it really is kind of a future state, but I'll offer it just for your context and consideration, and that is we are seeing in larger cities, not across the globe, but in larger cities, the utilization of autonomous vehicles. So Waymo is a good example. We see some bus shuttling services. So as we think about what that future state might look like, now we have plenty of time to adapt and adjust before we get to that future state. But e-bikes weren't a thing 10 years ago. And so, we have the ability to adjust and adapt. This doesn't have to be like we did where we adopted the parking regulations in 1969 and haven't substantially changed them. We can adjust to that. But I just want to offer that for your consideration as we deliberate this evening.
Thank you very much. Any clarifying questions from council members before we open the public hearing? Seeing none, we will open the public hearing, and I will turn to the deputy clerk to call names of those who signed up to speak.
All right, we have 14 individuals signed up for the public hearing. First up, we have Adam Bellinger, Omar Firestone, Mary Lou White, and Miles Silverman.
Good evening, Council, Maryland staff, and community. My name is Adam Bellinger. I view this ordinance as applying a parking policy citywide, which really makes the most sense in my mind in places like near campus, Western's campus. And I have a hard time with the kind of this being just so broad, when the state laws that are kind of driving this were much more targeted, and to me made a little bit more sense because we get the opportunities for a little bit better navigation of the trade-offs. The one thing that I have the hardest time with is that commercial parking is also being eliminated. And the impetus being that we're trying to promote housing, but the commercial parking minimums have nothing to do with affordability of housing. There's really very little connection except for maybe in multi-use properties. And there is a carve out for that in the state law. So the commercial parking minimums have really, I think it should be handled separately, and it should be addressed with some minimums. I've seen a number of times when commercial properties had provided for parking. One example is Twin Sisters Brewery. When they opened up, they had inadequate parking. The disruptions spread out all over the neighborhood, and it was quite adversarial relationship. Trader Joe's on James Street has too little parking, and they had to open up a whole nother store in order to make it work. But it spills out into the neighborhood around there, and it causes issues. And this isn't going to help our housing issues by addressing this on the commercial side. Parking will get more expensive as it gets more scarce, and it'll exacerbate affordability. It'll show up in transportation costs, not in housing. The smallest businesses like mine, which is a pretty micro business, we're relying on the excess capacity in the community, in the neighborhood around us. In order to function, we need that excess capacity. So by taking away from the commercial side, I think it really does a disservice to the community. But I am supportive of some of the things, like I do like the bicycle parking minimums, and I do think that there was a room for adjustment overall in the parking minimums. I think it's going too far in the commercial space in particular. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, Adam.
Good evening, esteemed council members. My name is Omar Firestone. I reside at 1717 4th Street. I am speaking tonight against passing this ordinance as written for two reasons. One, in my opinion, bicycle parking infrastructure and minimum automobile parking requirements merit separate consideration. There is insufficient overlap in the respective communities of interest to justify lumping them together. When you come up for re-election, Bellinghamsters deserve to know how you voted on these issues separately. Reason number two, and quoting the Exhibit A summary text, in addition to the code amendments, the staff also recommends continuing to pair the removal of minimum parking requirements with on-street parking management strategies to prevent spillover and make effective use of existing parking. The operative word here is spillover. Our little pocket neighborhood, bordered by 4th, Donovan, 10th, and Cogill, has neither sidewalks nor curbs. Many landscaped yards march right up to the asphalt. Not only are streets too narrow for parking, Cogill measures 15 feet 6 inches. But older homes such as ours have no garage and minimal setback, precluding widening the roadway or adding sidewalks. For many, existing parking is our own yard. Permitting a sixplex without an on-site parking in a neighborhood without street parking will create an unhoused vehicle population. Like any of you, I would leave a note the first time I found a given car on my grass, and maybe a more strongly worded one the second time. The third time, however, would prompt a call to the tow company, like any of you would make. So I have two questions. One, to the council, do you really want to see Johnson towing signs sprouting up in neighborhoods abutting high-density housing without on-site parking? And two, to the officers of the Bellingham Police Department, do you want to be responding to the dozens of trouble with a person calls that will inevitably result when an enraged car owner confronts a homeowner who had it towed off their lawn, or worse, the tow truck driver who is hooking it up? Spillover is a euphemism. I urge you to act now and de-escalate homeowner-renter tension and revise the ordinance to include carve-outs for neighborhoods without street parking. Or don't, and throw gasoline on the fire. But those who have to clean up the spillovers will remember them on Election Day. Thank you.
Thank you, Omar.
I'm Mary Lou White. I'm here to talk about SB 5184. I live at 2905 Birchwood Avenue in Bellingham, Washington, where I've been a resident for about 38 years. I didn't really prepare anything tonight, but there's a couple of RCWs I have written on something else that I feel applies to this. The proposal violates the following planning goals under RCW 26.70A.020. Number 10, protect, enhance the environment, enhance the state's high quality of life, including air, water quality, and availability of water. I'm really talking about high quality of life here. We could all jam, parking in everywhere. But for example, the other day, I came into my house and there was blood everywhere. Blood everywhere. And it was my dog. I had to run her to the vet. Thankfully, I was able to get my car out of my driveway and go over to the vet. Had this been a child, and the car is parked in a parking lot that's a large parking lot, but it's not near my residence, that would be a huge problem. What about the possibility of volcano eruption, the possibility of an earthquake in this area? I have not yet heard the city tell me how they plan on getting everyone out. What about these transportation modes that, like in Italy recently, when there was 110 temperatures and the transportation wasn't working and the people were stuck in their apartments that didn't have air conditioning? It's not that we should or shouldn't have cars. It's finding the balance of what's appropriate and what isn't. I also got to thinking about these big developments, which get HUD, LIHDTC, they get waivers on parks and school transportation fees, and they get density bonuses. And I, as a senior who is still working after 65 to pay bills, all these high subsidy things come out of my taxes. So this also affects that. Citizens participation is another RCW 2670A02011. This comes down from the state, and we are not getting appropriate citizen participation on these. Climate change and resiliency. We're all for climate change. We're all for helping housing. But again, it's a balance. Number 14, same RCW. Foster resiliency to climate impacts, natural hazards, protect and enhance the environment, economics, and human health and safety, and advance environmental justice. I live in the Birchwood neighborhood. I live in a neighborhood that is one of the lowest income neighborhoods and has the highest
Mary Lou,
pollution.
your time is up.
Okay, I'm done. I said enough, but for not having anything prepared, I hope I said enough to make an impact.
Thank you, Mary Lou.
All right, and then after Miles, we have Alex Ross, Tom Scott, Brian Gass, and Scott Pelton.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Miles Silverman, and I'm from the Cordata neighborhood. First, before I say anything else, I would like to say I support the higher e-bike and cargo bike ratios because these are potentially real car replacements. And if we want to foster alternatives to driving, as this ordinance seeks to do, to encourage people to use other modes of transportation, and which of course is also good for environmental goals and for lowering the cost of housing, we should make it easy for people to be able to use these modes of transportation. So I strongly support having the higher e-bike and cargo bike requirements. As for issues with spillover, really the problem there is that people currently need to drive everywhere for many people in Bellingham. So then the question is, what type of city do we want in the decades to come? Do we want to continue to have a city where people continue to have to drive everywhere, or do we want a city where people don't have to drive, and so it's easier for people to use other modes of transportation, which also means that there would be less demand for parking because I could bike to Trader Joe's, I could take the 331 because it's going to be faster, and if we remove parking minimums, we are shifting our city towards a place where people do not have to drive everywhere. With that in mind, I would say it is worth it to manage smaller location-specific growing pains as they appear, local issues with spillover, and manage those on a neighborhood-by-neighborhood level to help make sure that this broader shift towards a more multimodal city can move ahead, therefore protecting our environment, lowering the cost of housing, and keeping people healthier. And thank you for addressing the project in Samish. If you beat me to the punch there, but I think you even understated just how much sense that place makes as a place without to have less parking. Because it's studios, and because those studios are close to Western, a lot of the people living in those studios are going to be Western students, and they probably aren't going to all need cars. And studios already, you're also less likely to need cars because you're not schlepping kids to soccer practice or whatnot. And it's also in bike distance of downtown, and there are 60 spaces of bike parking in the proposed project. Again, this shows that developers are pursuing these lower parking projects in a way that actually makes sense. They're choosing the first obvious places to move in this direction, which is the direction we should be going anyway to build the city we want to build. So please support this change, and please support higher e-bike and cargo bike requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, Miles.
Hello, my name's Tom Scott, 1445 Grant Street. Thank you very much for hearing us. The gentleman just before me brought up a lot of interesting points. In a council meeting past, we were addressing this very same issue. Student car ownership was brought up, and I remember being a student, and at that time, and I still repeat, a lot of students still have cars because they go home to mom and dad, get the laundry done, get a warm meal, well-cooked meal. So I don't know that they really have that few cars in reality. A couple places that kept coming up that kind of belie some of the fallacies are, well, one was Bellis Fair in the opposite way. Bellis Fair itself is pretty vacant, pardon me. Bellis Fair itself is quite vacant, so yeah, who's going to park there when there's no store to go to? So that's not a great example, sorry. Trader Joe's is a place where people like to go to, and people circle that place. They have fender benders, they park out in the neighborhood. It's not a good thing. It's a cluster. Let's see, another one that was mentioned. Oh yeah, Twin Sisters was on my list also. That was another one, and it was a mess. On its grand opening, they had, I can't remember, 6 or 11 disturbance calls where the police had to respond. Part of that had to do with the parking and just plain that it was a bad idea. It was a kind of a zoning oversight that hadn't been caught by that point as far as noise and light industrial right up against residential. But bottom line was parking was an issue until they finally added a parking lot in their own footprint later. But up until that point, they even had the chutzpah to put up a sign showing people where to park in the neighborhood to work, to go to their business. So that wasn't a great deal. The whole idea of a 1,200 square foot residential project being built and worrying about parking for that, well, as of the state's removal of single family zoning, not much of an issue. There aren't that many houses that are that small. I live in one of them. No one's going to build one like that now. And certainly not to make profit at it. Commercial, I see some of the same arguments that the gentleman brought up earlier, and including when you talk about 3,000 square feet. One thing I had a question about, I didn't come here to talk about it, but boy, it sure kind of stuck out. I believe it's RCW 5184 that folks were talking about, and it looks like it tries to counter parts of the ADA, the 1991 Americans with Disabilities Act. Well, I believe the supremacy clause might make that illegal. So I think that might be a major problem. And there was a lot of talk about compliance with the state laws.
Thank you, Tom.
And I saw nothing about federal compliance. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Good evening. I'm just going to tell you a couple of facts real quick. The current reigning law in Bellingham says that the minimum size for a off-street parking space is 9 feet by 18 feet. Now, if you do some simple multiplication on that, you will find that that is 162 square feet. Now, I am not exaggerating when I tell you the following story, which is that when my great-grandfather came to this country as a refugee with his mother and his father and his sister, who was so traumatized by the pogroms in Ukraine that they had rendered her mute, when they came to this country, they moved into an apartment in Chicago that was no bigger than 150 square feet. That was an entire family of 4 living in less space than we mandate is given to automobiles in this city. Now, it is the year 2026, and that means that there are once again many people trying to flee the country of Ukraine, as my great-grandfather had to. And you will find that if they tried to come to Bellingham in the year 2026, it would be very difficult for them to do so. For one, the United States has not actually admitted any refugees over the course of the last year and a half, except for a handful of white South Africans fleeing white genocide, but that's federal issues. But for another reason, because they could not afford to live here. They could not afford to come here as refugees because we quite literally made it illegal to build the kinds of apartments that had literally been their refuge in decades past. At the same time that we have been making it difficult for people to live in our city, for people to afford to live in our city, we have been saying that we are more than happy to regulate and mandate the construction of large surface parking lots throughout this entire space. Once again, 162 square feet. The average size of a tent is 30 square feet. The average size of a extra large family tent on Amazon is 120 square feet. The average size of a dormitory at Western Washington University is 175 square feet, and the smallest dorms there are at 85 square feet. We are mandating this limited amount of space that we have in this city be dedicated to people's private 2-ton automobiles. And personally, I am not a fan of these priorities. I think that this is a fundamental statement about what kind of city we want to be. Do we want to be a city that makes it as easy as possible for the poorest, the most vulnerable amongst us to find shelter, or do we want to make it a city where it is very easy to park your car? Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Hello, everybody. Brian Gass here. I wanted to talk about this parking, which has always been a crazy thing. So what happens is, since the plan director's here, is that nobody's going to disagree that we need to do something better But I don't like the disingenuous of just presenting pictures of Bella's Fair. Yes, it's too much asphalt. Or pictures of, Albertson's old parking lot. Yes. But what you're not showing is having 6x density in Sunnyland or Columbia, where those streets are going to go. Or throwing people onto the street where some little kid's going to get run over because they can't run between the cars anymore. So you don't have to sit there and do this blanket gaslighting campaign to hate on parking. Because one of the things that people don't want to talk about is, yeah, sure, you want to have no parking, great. Who's going to come visit you? I guess you don't want family members to come visit. You don't want to have, is your mom going to take the bus and then walk down the street and then come knock on your door? At some point, can we can we aspire to have a better life than just living in a little cave somewhere and not having the ability to move around and enjoy Bellingham? One of the things I've seen is everybody here has property, mostly, and they bought their houses when it was cheap and the opportunities were there. But nobody feels guilty about killing opportunities. You know what you never bring up? I never hear anybody talking about income, never hear about jobs. You talk about the year of housing. I appreciate the mayor's efforts, but you know what? I don't see any affordable housing being built. I don't see people coming down. I also don't like that the city's sitting here claiming that the state is requiring it. The state's not requiring you to get rid of all the parking everywhere. Can we just ask you to be more reasonable about it and expect that people want to live in these places where they put a lot of their money and the middle class has amassed a great amount of wealth through that? Is it okay to not crap on it and ruin the things that they want to live in because you guys just want to do some blanket, box to check? The state's not requiring you to get rid of all the parking. It isn't. So that you shouldn't be telling people that. Now, the big hypocrisy is that I can't stand is, boy, you want to let the market decide for parking. Get rid of parking. Let the market decide. But you got to have bikes. Why can't the market decide your bike parking? Why can't the market decide your motor scooter parking? You can't, it's like, why do you have to pick and choose what side you want to crap on and what side you want to support? Just say it. Don't be disingenuous. Don't gaslight everybody like we're all a bunch of idiots. One of the things, too, is don't forget, you want to get rid of cars? Well, cars generate tax revenue. They generate license revenue. They allow people to go outside the city and shop and entertain, right? How many scooters are paying tax or bikes paying tax on that? Just start and paying a little more attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
All right, and then after Scott, we have Alex McLean, Andy Hansen, and Pickard, and Carrie Burnside.
Good evening. Scott Pelton, manager of the Whatcom Housing Alliance. I'm here to ask you to stay the course you set, now that study after study and city after city has proven it right. As our planning director said earlier, the sky has not fallen. 18 months ago, this council eliminated parking minimums citywide. Since then, cities across Washington, Bremerton, Shoreline, Bothell, have followed Bellingham's lead. More than 100 cities across the country, red and blue, have removed them citywide. So tonight isn't a leap into the unknown. It's finishing what Bellingham started. And you were early. The results are in. Where cities remove these mandates, the housing still gets built. The parking crisis critics predicted hasn't shown up in the cities that went first, including Spokane, where a council member is on record saying there's been no negative side effects since removing parking minimums in 2024. But you know what? Maybe there will be inconveniences, and it will still be the right policy decision to remove parking minimums. Now, the real debate here is affordability, so let me take it head on. The critics are right about one thing. Parking reform does not build affordable homes, but that was never the point. What it does is clears a barrier that makes every kind of home, from a fourplex to the affordable housing project, harder to build. Strengthening affordability is a separate job with separate tools. Why? Because parking mandates are a broken tool for affordability. If an affordability requirement costs a developer more than the parking relief is worth, they'll just build the parking and walk away. We get the asphalt, we don't get homes. There's new national research on exactly this question, which was just released weeks ago. It's worth reading in full because the headline number tells only half the story. Yes, it of course finds that market rate building alone won't close the gap. In most major metros, not for a century. In some, not for centuries. But it's a toolkit. And its real finding is that deregulation, subsidy, preservation, together with other programs, if done right, close the gap in about 17 years, not centuries. Parking reform is a deregulation piece. Keeping the mandate doesn't protect affordability, it just picks the slower road. And in one of the least affordable small metros in the country, we cannot afford to leave a single barrier standing. This is a yes and moment. Yes to removing the barrier that makes all housing harder to build, and yes to strengthening the real tools that create homes for lower income families. Two different jobs, let's do both well. You led on this, your neighbors followed. Thank you for making the right decision.
Thank you, Scott.
Alex McLean, Happy Valley. I had some written comments that were very detailed and spicy, but I'm going to go a more spiritual route. The Spokane example has been cited before. It's true, they have longer history. Happy Valley as a neighborhood has a long history as well, whereby you get to see the impacts of not providing infrastructure while still having the highest percentage of multifamily units in the city, according to the city's data, where you don't have in the bike ped master plans, when we talked to Chris Como and Chad Scholzhauser and the guy that, Eric Johnston, they all confirmed that Happy Valley has the highest deficit of missing infrastructure in the form of crosswalks and sidewalks and trail connectivity, et cetera. So you have that dynamic whereby you have a neighborhood that also statistically is one of the poorest, most economically challenged populations in the city, according to 2020 census data, and high density and 7,000 people, and yet you're not providing the infrastructure. I'm a hippie. I studied environmental science, I studied environmental journalism, and my degree was sustainable design. I'm also a builder. I've built every form of large-scale and small-scale projects, multifamily. And I should qualify. I'm a project manager in my past. I've done a lot of big stuff in this town and out of state, including building affordable housing. So you have a dynamic where you're not providing people a route to get out of their vehicles. Spokane had 700,000 people. Happy Valley has 7,000. You've now had permits for 2 projects that have 0 parking provided. There's a third project that I believe is going to be 45 or 50 units on Douglas Avenue, where you vacated a trail, a public trail in 2021, and that will have 7 off-street parking units. There's no sidewalk on that street. There's no sidewalks on Douglas Avenue between the largest high school in the city and the largest elementary school in the city. And I can have Public Works or Parks come to our meetings relentlessly for years. I was the neighborhood president for 8 years, and it's not going to change anything. But you guys need to put up guardrails,
Alex. Your time is
because
up.
you can build a building out of nothing but parking racks, and it won't change the fact that people aren't going to get out of their cars.
Hello, my name is Andy Hansen. I'm from the Whatcom Falls neighborhood. I should be putting a 6-year-old to bed right now, but instead I decided to come out here because I am so pro for this this legislation that I thought it was that important to come out here. We have avalanches of evidence that this is a great thing. It will help in so many ways throughout the city. I think you've all heard a lot of those arguments. I think some other people have brought up some good arguments, so I'm not going to go any further on that. There are some people who have talked about, what if you can't get a car there? My mom doesn't drive a car. She's not coming to your store. She's not coming to park there, but she can get around in other ways, and making a city that has the options for people to use a car or to use a bike or to walk, that's really what's going to be wonderful for us. I don't need 3 minutes. I'm very pro for this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy.
Good evening. My name is Carrie Burnside. I'm the board president of Future Homebuyers Organization. Thank you for the shout out. We're really excited about what we're doing. I'm here speaking for myself, though, and I have a personal ask. I support parking reform. At the same time, I do believe that we need to be honest about what this ordinance will do and what it does not do, more importantly. Tonight, I have a simple ask, and that's that we stop calling our current approaches bold. They're important. They bring us into alignment with state requirements, but they're not bold. And accurately naming a problem is the first step towards solving it. And this distinction matters for people most affected by our affordability crisis. Like the rest of the nation, Bellingham has two very distinct housing crises that are happening. Mr. Pelton mentioned the study. I hope you guys will look at this, but this does talk about, it comes from the National Multifamily Housing Council in the NYU lab. It talks about we have two distinct housing crises that are happening. One is of inventory, and the second is affordability. Crisis number one will be impacted by deregulation and parking reform. Crisis number two is the shortage of deeply affordable homes for households below 50% AMI. These include child care workers, paraeducators, home care aides, many grocery workers, service workers, and parking reform helps crisis number one, but without affordability measures, you are going to worsen our affordability crisis. And the data is there to prove that. Bellingham is one of the most expensive metros in our county. More than half of renters are cost burdened. 1 in 4 working families cannot afford to meet basic needs, and hundreds of children experience homelessness every year. This problem is getting worse year after year, and it's not happening in a vacuum. Bellingham has a long history of exclusionary land practices, including Edgemoor, that shaped who could live there and who could build wealth. Those patterns did not disappear. They show up today in our land values, our limited supply of affordable housing, and the deep affordability gap. When we pass blanket deregulation, which is what our ordinance is, without affordability measures, we risk repeating those patterns in a new form. We stabilize the middle of the market while widening the gap at the bottom. It's not bold, it's incomplete, and we cannot solve this dual crisis with single crisis tools. Parking reform is valuable and it's necessary, but if we're actually going to close this massive affordability gap, then we must pair it with affordability. We must have targeted affordability measures. My ask tonight is simple. Let's just stop calling it bold until we pair it with affordability. Your time is up. Thank you for your time. Have a good night.
Thank you, Carrie. Do we have Ken Picard in the room at all? Ken? Okay, so we'll go online to Justin. Justin, you should be able to unmute and turn on your camera if you'd like.
Sure. Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Great. Yeah. Council, my name is Justin Dansbury. First of all, I support building more housing in Bellingham, but I oppose permanently abolishing minimum parking requirements citywide. Parking reform is reasonable. A blanket elimination is not. The basic problem is this: parking demand doesn't not disappear because the city removes it from the code. It just moves it somewhere else. Bellingham, as you know, is not Manhattan. We're a city of about 100,000 people spread over about 30 square miles. The census reports that our average commute for most Bellingham citizens is about 18 minutes. That tells us something important, that this is a city where we mainly take daily trips that are practical by a car. And many people rely on cars for work, errands, school, childcare, medical appointments, and family life. In addition, the average cars per household in Bellingham is about 2, and most people drive to work alone. So this is not an ideological argument. This is the current reality. People are not going to ride bikes in the rain in the winter to take kids to school. E-bikes are not. Families are not going to ride their kids to schools in Waymos and pay $15 to $20 each ride. These concepts are dreams, and I really find it hard to match the current reality or any concept of it. At the same time, Bellingham is already expensive. The census reports that medium owner occupied home value is about $700,000, and the median income is about 74, and the poverty rate is about 17%. So when we're talking about parking, we should be careful not to pretend that this is only affecting wealthy homeowners who dislike change. It also affects renters, families, service workers, caregivers, etc. The city's own timeline shows that this is no longer a short experiment. The interim ordinance eliminated parking minimums went in effect in early 2025. It was extended and is now proposed for permanent regulations. That means the question before you is not whether to study parking reform. The question is whether to permanently transfer parking decisions from public standards to individual developers. And this is also a fairness issue. I understand why developers want flexibility, but if residents still own cars, which they will, and savings do not eliminate the parking demands, that shifts the responsibility of parking onto nearby streets. Developers can reduce their cost, but this translates to public cost. For example, in the Cascadia Daily, a staff memo estimated that a parking spot in the city of Bellingham is about $16,000. The public absorbs impacts, crowded curb parking, blocked sightlines, more circling for spots, etc. A good example of this conflict is that there's currently a city ordinance still in effect that if you leave your car in a spot for more than 72 hours, you can get a ticket. I am not asking the city to keep outdated policies or excessive parking rules forever. I'm asking for a middle path. Reduce the requirements where transit is truly frequent, allow shared parking, allow case-by-case reductions, but do not abolish minimum citywide and pretend every neighborhood has the same transit access, street access, and resident needs.
Thank you, Justin.
Parking reform makes sense, but eliminating minimums entirely privatizes the benefit and then socializes the burdens to all the citizens.
Justin. Your time is up.
Thank you, Justin.
Okay, Perry? Perry, you should be able to unmute and turn on your camera if you'd like.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm sorry, after 6 years of Zoom, you'd be able to figure out me, right?
That's all right. Go ahead.
For the record, my name is Perry Eskridge. I'm representing the Whatcom County Association of Realtors and the Building Industry Association of Whatcom County. First of all, I want to just state up front, we're speaking in support of this. I think that Mr. Pelton adequately covered the reasons why the professional associations involved in building housing and selling housing support this removal of a significant barrier to the construction of affordable housing in our city. I realize that this is not, an entirely popular proposition, but I do have to tell you from discussing this situation with our members, it's not so much that people agree that they want to remove all parking, but what it does do is give the developers the ability to right-size their parking. I really appreciated Director Lyons' description of the project on Byron Street because it filled in so many questions that I had regarding that specific project. And when he talks about the proximity of that building to urban amenities within easy walking distance, I think suddenly the decision to go with reduced or no parking in that project, I'm not sure what level it is, suddenly made sense. Studio apartments near a college, I do have to disagree that I don't think a lot of younger people are bringing cars to college. In fact, nearly everybody I know has a young adult that has decided to not get a driver's license. I'm, as somebody who collects cars, I'm shocked at that determination, but I also understand it. These are people that are used to ordering their food or ordering a ride with equal ease. Again, I just think it's a step in the right direction. It's not a silver bullet. None of these tools are. But it has allowed our development community to do their market research, think about the individuals that will be occupying these developments and what they need, and accommodate those needs accordingly based on that research. So thank you very much, and I urge you to pass the final ordinance.
Thank you, Perry. No other names. Is there anyone in the audience who did not sign up but would like to speak to this item?
Good evening, Brian Armstrong. I wasn't really going to speak, but then after hearing some comments about parking and the streets and everything, I was like, well, there's some things that came to mind. I was just thinking about some comments about how certain neighborhoods don't have the infrastructure to handle on-street parking, and then specifically Happy Valley. And then when we were talking about Western students not having cars, it kind of got me to thinking, well, then why do we have all those parking lots that are full around Western? And when I go by Whatcom Community College, I see the same thing. So the idea that everybody is, there's so many of the new generation that's not getting a license and not driving a car just seems ridiculous to me when you see the parking lots are full. And then when we talk about how this is going to help with getting affordable housing, well, has it? Because all the presentations, it seems like, well, this is going to be market rate. And it's like, okay, well, that's great, but where's the affordable housing? And the picture with Bellis Fair Mall with the empty parking lot, and I think of the Birchwood Park Manor and also Sunset Square. There's the old Kmart there, right? You have these giant empty spots just constantly vacant. Right now it's going to be a Spirit Halloween over in Sunset Square. So what are we doing in order to work with those people that own that property and trying to see if they can't work some housing into those spaces? I mean, could you imagine if somebody built a high rise on top of the old Kmart and all that parking lot there, how maybe it would be full, or maybe you could expand. There's a park, there's a pharmacy, there's a grocery store. Same with Park Manor Square. It's a food desert in the Birchwood neighborhood. Why aren't we advocating for working with the developer and trying to build a high rise above that and then putting a grocery store at the base? And then maybe that Rite Aid that went out of business would actually be there, And then we also have Bellis Fair, which is just a ghost town as what it once was back in the late 80s, early 90s when it was a thriving mall. And you have a Forever 21 slot right next to the food court. Where's a high rise there? We have plenty of parking, plenty of space. You put housing there, there would be even more business for Bellis Fair. There's a grocery store right across the street. There's another one 2 blocks down. There's even another one further down Bakerview Road. There's Cordata. In that area, you also have the walk-in clinic for Peace Health. You have a pharmacy in Target. I mean, these are ideas that I just don't understand why nobody seems to be working on those, because we still see the same parking lots empty year after year. But now our proposal is to do parking restrictions and then stress out certain neighborhoods more than others with a blanket restriction. I just think there's more ideas out there that we should be talking about, and I just don't hear it being part of the conversation. But thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Hello, I am Ryan Cunningham. Dear members of the Bellingham City Council, I would like to say affordable housing is important, but we can't have affordable housing without significant places for where the people who live in it can work. If that means building those places up, higher than we do currently, then we may, then that could be, then that may be necessary. No, we do have to take into account. We may have to take into account other concerns like flight paths or but I do. Sorry, I'm not very good at public speaking at this time. But I do understand affordable housing is a key component of of a sustainable economy. Goodbye.
Thank you, Ryan.
Hi, my name is Kim Abercrombie. I came just because I heard about this building going on Samish Way and 34th, saying there's going to be 52 units built with no parking. And Bellingham is people come, right, because of all that's here to offer skiing and what's on the lake and mountain biking. And it's just, you need a car to do this. And I'm a new resident. And I feel like everything I do, I have to drive to, whether it's Bar. I mean, it's far for me to get down U Street or to Bar or, Costco. It just doesn't, the city's not developed and ready for people to just take public transport. Or if you provide them Lime bikes, maybe for do that. It just feels like we're not ready to have no cars and to not have people at least have one place when you're all living there, right? If you have a 52 unit place, it should have at least one parking spot. Are they going to just park in the park and ride parking lot? Where do they go? So I had one more point. My children came to college here. We're new here, but they did it just for all the outdoors activities, and they continue to do all these outdoor activities. So it just feels like you have to have a way for them to get around, and you can't do that. The other story that comes to mind just quickly is I know there was a college student that lived across the freeway on I-5 walking to Western in the winter, and the snowbanks were high, and she slipped and fell and died on I-5. You can look up, that was just a couple years ago. My son was anyway, you just can't not have a way for people to get around with this weather and the rain, and to limit and say, oh, just because they're a student and they live by the park and ride, they can easily get to college. And so just an appeal to say, the changes sound extreme to me. So, thank you.
Thank you, Kim.
My name is Roseanne Lawn, and I live in Bellingham, and I live on Ferry Avenue, which is just up the street from Bill McDonald, and I know that intersection quite well. Right now, there's really not a whole lot going on there. That intersection is getting very busy. There's no left turn lane to go from Bill McDonald to go on Samish. The freeway entrance is also there. It's getting really busy, and I'm really worried you put that many units in that corner is going to make it even worse. If you want to look at a parking example of what happens when you don't have parking or enough parking, just look across the street. Directly across, there's not enough parking, so they park on the street. That's usually what happens. And what's going to happen if you build that unit, 54 units, I don't know if you can put any parking there, they're going to park across the street at Hagen's, and they're going to probably park in the neighborhood. So I'm all for limiting parking. From when I was at Western, there were more students getting cars. That may have changed, I don't know. I think we need to provide some parking also if you have emergency vehicles that need to get in, caregivers that need to get in. We need visitor parking so that medically wise, there is a place for people to park. You just can't eliminate all the parking. It's not feasible. It's not really practical. And I've heard stories of other cities doing it, and a lot of people don't like it. Also, visitor parking. It's not fair that the neighborhood has to take up all the visitor parking for these no parking apartment buildings, because it's really not reality. It's not. I've been without a car before, and I liked it, but it takes a lot of your freedom away. It really is a sacrifice. When you're young, it's a lot easier. When you get older, it's not so easy depending on your situation. So the other thing is, if you have e-bikes and you live upstairs, they're very hard to get upstairs. And if you have to charge a bike, you have to get it upstairs to plug it in. Because I live on the second floor and I have an e-bike. And I had to get a lighter one, and it's a struggle for me to get it upstairs. So with all the bikes and the e-bikes, which are great, and the cargo bikes, they have to figure out where to put those and like how to charge them. If you put them in your apartment, can you get it up there, and is it even safe to park them up there? Because e-bikes aren't, the batteries are really not. They're kind of a fire hazard. So they have to just think about where, I love e-bikes, I have one, I have all kinds of bikes, but you have to figure out how to do that. So I just don't think we should eliminate all parking. I think it's gonna really work. I think we need to compromise, tell you the truth.
Thank you, Rosanna.
And we will move online to Elizabeth. One moment. Okay, go ahead, Elizabeth. You should be able to unmute and turn on your camera if you'd like.
Can you hear me?
Elizabeth, you're unmuted, but we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Really, really faintly.
Hang on just a second. Can you hear me now?
Elizabeth, we can't hear you. We have one other person online with their hand raised. I'm going to move to Anne, and if you're able to work on your mic in the meantime, maybe we can come back to you. One second. Okay, Anne, you should be able to unmute and turn on your camera if you'd like.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
I have a lot of the same points that other people have made already, but I'll just put in my 2 cents. I feel like it's putting the cart before the horse by eliminating parking requirements before increasing access to public transportation through the city, throughout the city. Even to me as a bicyclist, bike parking and bike lanes are a poor substitute in this hilly city in a northern climate with many retirees. And currently there are only a few walkable neighborhoods, especially in the city core, WTA currently comes through our neighborhood once an hour, and our e-bikes do not fit on most bus bike racks. Therefore, a blanket parking policy throughout the city does not make sense. It seems out of touch or naive to think that residents in multifamily housing or small homes don't need a vehicle to get across town for work, childcare, shopping, medical appointments, volunteering, or social events. Where will they park their vehicles? Well, it would be in neighboring streets with already limited space. Exhibit A says that the city will use, quote, on-street parking management strategies to prevent spillover. Well, will the city really monitor and enforce encroachment into neighborhoods? It's difficult now to find parking downtown to eat out or to go for coffee or to the show. And some downtown businesses have cited lack of foot traffic as a reason for closing. Perhaps that's related to parking issues. I applaud your vision of reduced emissions through bicycling and electric vehicles. But before squeezing more cars onto side streets and neighborhoods by making this ordinance permanent, I would urge you to reject the total elimination of parking requirements and build up our public transit infrastructure first. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne.
Elizabeth, would you like to try again?
Sure. Can you hear me? You can't hear me now.
I'm sorry, Elizabeth, we're not able to hear you. We don't have anybody else online with their hand raised at this time.
Okay. Then at this time, we will close the public hearing and bring the conversation back to council. Items from council members. Councilmember Cotton.
Thank you, staff, for the presentation, public for your comments. To just go back to the fundamental benefit here. So we do see in different parts of the city, builders provide different levels of parking depending on the context, right? The availability of transit and other modes of transportation, the demographics of people who are going to be living in those buildings. And so we see that, if adequate parking isn't provided, that have trouble leasing units usually. They might have trouble finding a lender who will finance the project if there's not adequate parking in the plan. And so I think there is a lot of evidence that those contextual factors help inform the amount of parking that's provided a lot better than an arbitrary table that we just made up decades and decades ago and didn't update since. And the benefits here are really clear, right? It's more housing in a time we have a historic housing shortage. I'm one of those people who doesn't own a home, and we know when there's a shortage of housing, that creates more market power for landlords, for incumbent property owners, and makes it really difficult if you're a first-time home buyer or you're a renter to afford to live in our community. I just want to clarify a couple things about SB 5184. This completely preempts our ability to enact parking minimums for any dwelling unit under 1,200 square feet. So not just like a small home, but basically most multifamily, as well as commercial uses under 3,000 square feet, among a host of others. And so I think we could have a very robust philosophical debate, perhaps, about whether or not holding the ability to right-size parking hostage to try and get other things would lead to the outcomes that we would want. But the fact is that the state has taken this big step to make our communities able to be places that can be more walkable and more affordable and more inclusive for everybody. And I'm excited that we've done this work. We've tested this out and seen that this is actually a pretty modest reform, right? And that it's pretty incremental opportunities to reduce some number of parking spaces and gain usually a significant number of units, and that there is that contextual, decision-making about how much parking to require. So I have a couple of teensy little amendments, and I'm very supportive of the Planning Commission's recommendations, and we should fix that typo too. But I'll first go ahead and move approval of the ordinance.
Second. So we have a motion from Councilmember Cotton and a second by Councilmember Huffman. Councilmember Anderson?
Just quick clarify, are you moving the recommendations from staff or the whole plan?
I moved the whole ordinance, and I'm happy to follow up with that additional amendment now if we'd like.
Councilmember Anderson.
Okay, I won't support that, and there's a lot of things in here I can support, but some things that I can't. I was really hoping this would go to a work session so we could have a further discussion on some of the content. So I'm hoping I'm going to get the liberty to explain what my concerns are before there's a vote. So the first thing that I would like to ask staff, Senate Bill 5184 does provide some carve-outs. One was mentioned earlier regarding the commercial parking. My question, one of my primary concerns is ADA parking. And when this came forward as a temporary, that was one of the things that I spoke at length at, is that putting in buildings that do not have ADA parking and we're dependent on street parking perhaps, or assessing whether or not there's impact. My concern is that a population in our community who may already have difficulties finding housing will even it'll exasperate it. Because if there's not ADA parking and they work and they don't have the transport needed, it's going to eliminate areas that they could reside in. So I'm wondering, is because if we pass this and there's like no requirement for parking, and an example is along Bill McDonald, the 54 units, if it should go through as planned, since they are intending no parking whatsoever, that means they would not have to put ADA parking in at all, is my understanding. And we would not require it. But would this bill, does it allow a carve out that even though a developer has decided to build without parking, could the city require a certain amount of ADA parking based on some metrics of what would have been assumed previous? I mean, can we require 1 or 2 ADA parking in a building like that?
So the state legislation 5184 does not allow that. That was something that we had looked into and discussed, but they clarified in the work that they've done since our interim ordinance went into effect that that's not allowed. There is a pathway where if we felt very strongly about this and wanted to apply to the state to have different regulations, we could go through that process, but we cannot just approve a code and make our own choice there. We would have to go through a process to get approval from the state.
Councilmember Lillquist?
First, a small thing. A motion to refer an item to committee, a main motion or a main motion under amendment takes priority. So we can still refer to committee. It's allowed and it's prioritized over the main motion.
Councilmember Anderson?
Well, if I can supersede the motion for moving this forward, I'd make a motion that we refer this to council of a whole.
Second.
Okay, so I will seek clarification. We currently have a second motion from Councilmember Anderson, seconded by Councilmember Lillquist. I believe the motion is to refer this item to committee of the whole for a work session or for further discussion. But we do have a seating motion from Councilmember Cotton, seconded by Councilmember Huthman, to move approval on the ordinance as presented. So I will turn to Mr. Erb. I don't know if you're able to speak to the impact of a motion to refer.
Yeah, so I would think either the motion to refer to committee would have to be received as a friendly amendment to the underlying motion, or I don't think you can make that motion on top of the underlying motion to approve I think that the first motion has to be addressed first before you can.
Point of order. We are governed by Robert's Rules of Orders, newly revised. Under Robert's Rules, the priority for motions is sort of in reverse order. The main motion is the lowest priority order, and motions like tabling and referring to committee and adjourning the meeting, which seem extraordinarily interruptive, actually have higher priority. Because under Robert's Rules, you kind of handle things in reverse order and dispose of these other things to get back to the main motion. So we are governed by Robert's Rules, are newly revised, and this is an appropriate and legal and allowed motion.
These are parliamentarian half the time.
I'm not going to argue the point. I'll defer to the council president on how she would like to deal with these motions that are overlapping and maybe conflicting.
Yeah. I would say unless you want to, we could recess to pull up the code, but I think otherwise, that's our preference, is to use that as a guiding document. I think if we're accomplishing what the council, wishes as a whole. We had a first motion before us for approval, so I think we could accomplish the same by proposing an amendment to move this to committee. And basically, it would be tabling the vote for this until the next meeting to be able to have a work session.
So I'll even muddy it a little bit more, since I already made a motion and it was second. Am I allowed at this point to make a different motion since there's one on the table, which I didn't think I could?
Okay.
So to
then
make
we
a
will-
friendly amendment, I'm not sure if I could do that.
We'll vote.
Under Robert's Rules of Order, certain motions are amendable, others are not. Certain motions are debatable, others are not. The motion to refer to a committee is debatable but not amendable.
Could you speak English on that?
Yeah, it's
one?
not, you said it's not. Yeah. You said it's debatable but not amendable.
Yes, so a motion is amendable if sort of its content can fluctuate. Since a motion to refer to a committee is very clear what it is. You don't have like shades of it. Like you can't like change the number, like in a parking from 2 units or 10 units or whatever. So certain motions, like motion to adjourn, is not amendable because it only has one meaning. So it's not amendable, but it is debatable.
So
The question was though about disposing of that current motion.
The way to dispose of a current motion is to vote on it.
Right.
Or to have a superseding motion, and most of those are nuclear and you don't want to invoke them.
Councilmember Cotton.
We do have, 2 meetings. We take action over 2 meetings, so there will be a day's session before we reach third and final. My recommendation is if at the end of tonight we feel like we would benefit from more discussion, that we schedule that. But I don't see a reason to delay first and second this evening. So I would respectfully vote no on the motion, but very open to scheduling a work session if that is the will of a majority of council members. I just don't think we should slow down this process, especially with SB 5184's timeline coming right up. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay. Then. Yes, Councilmember Williams, microphone.
Yeah, what I'd like to know is, this ordinance has been in effect basically for 6 months.
Councilmember Williams?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm going to hold you. So if we're currently discussing the most current motion, which is just whether to move it to committee or not, then I'll hold that until we get to the main motion if we get there.
I think my question was speaking to that.
To the main motion?
To
Whether
her
to
motion.
whether to move it to committee?
Yeah.
Okay, go for it.
When I look at moving something to a committee like this, the first thing I look at, and I'm looking at this way, we've had an interim motion or an interim ordinance for how long? 6 months? 18 months. And has there been any problem with the ADA parking issue in that 18 months that we've had the motion? I mean, is there a significant change in the ADA parking effort or ADA parking issue that is different than the original ordinance?
The original ordinance contemplated requiring an ADA space within that provision, and then we've since amended that, and it's now based on it's a ratio, as Elizabeth described, it's a ratio based on the number of spaces that are being provided. So for example, I'm going off of memory, so I may not get the numbers absolutely right, but if you're providing between 1 and 25 spaces, then the first space has to be a van accessible ADA space. Then when you get to 26 to 50, it's now 2 spaces, and so on and so forth. So it's dependent on how many spaces a project is providing. I think that's part of the misconception here, is it's not eliminating all parking, it's limiting the mandate for a certain ratio. And so you still have those obligations to meet that requirement if you are providing on-site parking.
Okay.
Councilmember Anderson?
I know I'm not supposed to speak to my motion, so I'm going to try to frame it, not speaking to it, but as a colleague had asked for clarification, I'll ask for clarification. The temporary, that that has been in place for a certain amount of months, did it include eliminating all the parking requirement or any of the parking requirement for commercial space?
Yes, it did.
Okay, so it had no
Citywide. It
zero
applied
parking
citywide
required.
regardless of the land use.
Okay. The current motion, Councilmember Huthman?
Okay, current motion. I would be fine voting on this tonight, fine voting on it, discussing further in committee. I think that we have had this interim ordinance in effect for over a year. This has been a conversation we've been having for longer than that. I think that we have all had quite an education in this issue. We have seen some of the effects of the interim ordinance, where there's a decade of information from other cities that have enacted a citywide ordinance as this one. I would feel comfortable voting on this tonight, or happy to have more conversation later. More conversation another day means we get to go home earlier. That's a positive, but also if we want to have that discussion here tonight with the audience that we do in attendance as well, I'm happy to do that.
So my question before voting on this motion is to members of the council I know the current motion is that Councilmember Cotton made was to adopt the ordinance as it is written in the packet. I also understood that there may be some minor amendments that you were wanting to make. It sounded as though maybe there were other amendments or considerations from other council members. So my thought is if this was going to be a lengthy turn into a work session where we consider amendments and start wordsmithing from the dais potential motions for adoption, I would personally then want to refer this to committee. If there seems to be some consensus about an up-down as it is, right? I mean, that's my own rationale on the motion. So just sharing my thoughts about where I'm at and how I may vote. But my recommendation without I could recess to research Robert's rules, but I think if we're all in agreement, my executive decision would be to rule or vote first on the motion to refer to committee. And if that is voted down, then we would proceed with then the motion initially brought forward by Councilmember Cotton. If that is passed by the majority of the council, then your motion would sort of stand and in essence be deferred for consideration during that work session. Any thoughts in response to that proposal, Councilmember Cotton?
Yeah, let's vote.
Okay. Any other clarifying questions before we vote on whether to refer this to committee or not? Okay. So the current motion we are going to consider was brought forward by Councilmember Anderson, seconded by Councilmember Lilliquist, which is a motion to refer this to Committee of the Whole for a work session. There's no further discussion. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, no?
No.
No.
Okay. Do we need a roll call or no? I have 4-3. Do you need those? Did you get the names?
If I could just get show of hands for no's, that would be helpful.
I have Councilmember Hamel, Williams, and Cotton. Okay. So then the motion passes 4-3, and this will then be referred to committee. Councilmember Lilliquist.
A common practice when we refer something to committee is to give the staff indication of what we would even be dealing with when we got to committee. So I would kind of like to maybe have Jace give us some indication of what his amendments would be. Me personally, when this came up last time, I was concerned about situations in neighborhoods where there is no sidewalks and there's no available on-street parking. And so in those cases, a building with no parking can't rely upon off-site parking. And I won't introduce amendment language, which did not pass. And I would like to continue discussing ways of reducing impact in neighborhoods where there just isn't on-street parking. And so it isn't realistic to assume that new development can rely upon on-street parking. So that is an issue that I was going to bring up tonight and I would bring up in the work session.
Councilmember Lilliquist, if I may, in your scenario, and I'm sorry I didn't ask this earlier, is that new construction that you're hypothesizing about?
This would be new construction.
Okay, so one thing that I would offer for the council's consideration is that anytime we get new construction, there is frontage improvement requirements that are associated with that. So I just in the fullness of context, you would have what we call currently 3/4 street standards, which is sidewalk, curb, gutter, improvement of the road if there is an alley access. So you would get, at a minimum, improvements in front of that property. That doesn't mean you're having a complete network, but I just wanted to give you that context as well.
I'm interested in the ability to have a case-by-case trigger in case the blanket assumption doesn't apply. And you're right, there could be some improvements. Those improvements could create the sidewalk linkage that didn't exist and solve the problem that way, or maybe it wouldn't.
Councilmember Anderson?
Thank you. Some of the things that I'm interested in, I had asked at the last meeting, and I do want to share that, one, I didn't support the temporary the first time because I was concerned about ADA, and I was also concerned about the impacts on neighborhoods that don't have the infrastructure, and I was kind of hoping there was a little bit of a carrot and stick, and at the time the option could have been available to have affordability be part of that, whether it's funding going into the housing fund or something in exchange for a situation about parking. That the state has taken that away, so I know that's not possible. But we're looking at, one of the things that I asked, the reason why I said yes the last time was because we knew this was coming forward and we needed time to work on it, but we didn't know exactly what was coming forward. So when we're saying that we've had a lot of time on this, I see it as I've only really had a week and a half when this was put to print, and I could actually see it in writing what staff were bringing forward. We've talked a little bit about it 18 months ago, but we haven't really talked a lot about it since. So I don't want the public having the perception that we've been chewing on this for a really long time, because I don't think we have at the dais had that opportunity, and that's what I was hoping for, having it go to session. So one of the things that I would like more information on is the commercial parking. Even though it was temporary, it wasn't my focus at the time, it was more on housing. But I am concerned about some areas having too much, and so knowing a little bit more about when we might be bringing forward maybe limits on maximum, but also what will it look like in areas that we're dealing with maybe commercial infill where there is no parking? Another concern is the one housing that's going in potentially along Bill McDonald. If you go into those upper streets in that established neighborhood on Seaholm Hill, they don't have sidewalks, they have ditches. So I want to know a little bit more about how we're going to monitor and what would be the tipping point. It's easy for us to say we're going to monitor this and then reassess, but I would like to know what that plan looks like, who's going to be responsible for that monitoring, where the complaint system would go in. One of my concerns is, like, on one street that I know, it is probably about a lane and a half street, no sidewalks, but people's gates to their property is really right on the street. And so when somebody parks there because there is no parking for that house that has a lot of people in it, or the new development half a block up that didn't put parking in, I know individuals in a wheelchair who could not get into their property because of that blockage. So who do they complain to? And then are we going to have a system in place that people can request no parking signs to be put up if they are potentially going to be in a situation they can't access their property or the mail? This one individual, this house, they didn't get mail delivery for 5 days while they tried to hunt down somebody who kept parking during the daytime in front of their property. So there's real situations that will happen, and I want to know with some assurance what the plan is, how we're going to be addressing those versus waiting for the complaints to pile up. Because I know my constituency, I want to be able to tell them with assuredness, this is the plan in place and this is where you could find it and this is how you're going to be doing a complaint. Because I don't want all of those in my inbox having to try to ferret it out with the city. What are we doing about this? Because that, again, is putting the cart before the horse. So I want to make sure that the cart is assembled correctly before we launch on this. So commercial, I have some concerns on. And then also, I know the state has made the change that anything under 1,200 square feet, which is really going to be our ADUs, some of our infill, some of our duplexes and triplexes. Basically, it's going to be a lot of our rental. I think housing that is above that, if I was a developer, I think I'd be putting parking in because I'm going to want to sell it for a premium price. But I'd like to know a little bit more about, one of the questions I had asked last time is how many projects have come before planning and discussion, and how many are maybe now vested because they've started the process that are not including parking. We've heard of one. I've heard rumors about 2 more. I had asked for that information to come forward for this session, and I didn't hear about that, so I'd like to hear about that for the next one. And do we know of any commercial that is being run through the process that is looking at no parking? I'd like to know a little bit more about what that would look like. So those are a few of the questions that I had.
Councilmember Huffman.
Thank you. Councilmember Anderson, you actually touched on a couple things that I was going to mention as some helpful information for the next time that we meet, particularly what the effects that we've seen from this interim ordinance. Very interested in hearing about that. I know that a year and a half really isn't a good amount of time to get a good grasp on what effects might be, but something's better than nothing. Also, a year ago, Iris, our legislative analyst, did write a really wonderful white paper on parking minimum requirements and different legislation that's been passed in different cities and some of those effects. I would be really interested in hearing from a planner's perspective, what are some of the other cities that we can look to that have passed this legislation, particularly similar sized cities, I think is helpful, like Hartford, Connecticut. What have the effects been in those cities? How has that informed the recommendation here in our own city? What can we learn? Positives and negatives, if that's something that can be presented as well at the next meeting.
Councilmember Anderson.
And just a request, we've all started getting emails from people who don't know that there's a state law. Some folks that I talked to, yes, we did have an interim based on the mayor's directive. And so people see that, and now they're seeing what we're doing as a permanent, and they don't know in between that there was a state law change. And so I've been having a lot of conversations this weekend, like, people wanting me to stop this because of concerns of Birchwood or Happy Valley, and I'm like, I can't for this area, and they didn't know about the state bill. So I think we need to do a better job to be able to get that information out, because people are thinking it's something we're doing. Interesting tidbit, and I know, radio surveys are not empirical research, and you log in and it based on who your listenership is. But on my way leaving from here to go home before I came back, on the radio they listed a Bellingham Now survey, and 94% or it was 96% of the respondents thought the eliminating parking was a horrible idea for Bellingham. And like 3 or 4% thought it was good. And so there are people out in the community who think this is a horrible thing, and they may not be educated or aware that this is a state change that we have to comply with. So I think it's important, maybe the press will pick it up now because I'm talking about it, but I think we need to have some of that information go out so that whether our staff could help write a response that goes out to people, or perhaps there could be something that goes out on press, educating people, even though a majority of people here at the dais and with administration may be supporting it. Not everybody does, obviously, but it is something we're going to have to comply with.
Councilmember Hamel.
The mayor wanted to respond. Okay. Since this is going back to a work session, I'd want to understand the preemption language on Senate Bill 5184, as well as the timeline for implementation, and when we'd be obligated to follow that. And if I can go in one more question. And then there's, earlier in the presentation, there was a request to vote to change ordinance language, and it had to do with the ratio for, I think it was e-bike parking or cargo bike parking. Was that correct? Okay.
Yeah, the Planning Commission, when they were looking at the suggested ordinance, recommended a few changes to the bike parking standards a little bit. And I can respond to some of the comments that have been brought up tonight, or if you would prefer to defer, yeah, we can wait till the work session.
Councilmember Lillquist?
One of the things that was said tonight, because I missed it, and I still can't find it, was the elimination of the Fairhaven Parking District. The reason why that confuses me is because the Fairhaven Parking District is an odd thing in that what it does is it allowed for the creation of commercial properties with zero parking, meaning it already does what I think this ordinance intends to do. Why should we eliminate it? Because it's not in conflict. And also, I kind of thought we couldn't eliminate it because this has been talked about in years past. And basically, it's an executed agreement that already exists and creates an entitlement that runs with the property. And there's no ordinance that we can eliminate that removes that contractual right that runs with the property. So during the work session, I'm going to understand what that actually means by quote unquote eliminating the parking district.
Director Lyon, did you have any comments you wanted to share this evening?
I'll wait till the work session.
Okay. Marilyn?
I just want to say that I welcome the chance to work with staff. We've heard a lot of good feedback from council tonight about how to prepare for the work session. But this is a change that I am deeply committed to. I spend an extraordinary amount of time managing the actual harms of us having underbuilt housing in this community for decades. And so this is an important tool in our toolbox. It's been in effect for more than a year now, and it is incremental change that will play out over decades. And concurrent with the change that will play out will be an investment of tens of millions, if not $100 million in what council approved as the locally preferred alternative for bus rapid transit here. It will take place concurrent with tens of millions of dollars in bike and ped infrastructure that will play out over the next few decades. We heard about a car share program for EVs earlier today. Car share will continue to evolve and be adopted. Director Lyon mentioned autonomous vehicle. That sounds like fantastical fiction, science fiction of the future, but that will continue to evolve and come to communities like Bellingham. And so I am eager to address the concerns, but also implement this as the important tool that we know that it has proven to be, not only in the year that it's been in effect in Bellingham, but in other communities as well. So I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Councilmember Anderson?
Thank you. And I want to thank everyone for the opportunity, because I know this will pass for a lot of reasons. But I really think a good due process is to have the questions answered, because those questions that I asked are questions that the community has asked of me, and I don't have answers for them. So I think for people, they want to see that we have a discussion, questions are being asked and answered, because this is a big shift. And big shifts require that people feel that they're heard and that opportunity is given. And if something's just presented and we pass it the same night, I'll probably hear more about that in complaint than actually the fact that it's happening. So I don't think we're missing any important deadlines. I don't think that it undoes good work or what the goals are, but it gives us a good process. And again, for me, it's knowing what's next and what those steps look like, more than a few lines on a paper. And I don't expect necessarily a completely written out plan of like, this is how it's gonna work, but just a little more information. So when the public comes to me about a complaint, I'm gonna have some tools to be able to tell them this is what we're doing. I think that's an important element. And So I appreciate the time, and I'm glad other council members had some questions that they had the opportunity to forward, so that we're all going to be have a good toolbox going forward to work with the community. So thank you.
Thank you all for the discussion. So again, this will come back at our next meeting for a work session. Going forward, since we are 2 hours in, I do want to take a break, but I wanted to defer to the mayor on whether you want to handle the appointments and mayor's report. I feel like we may lose some of our audience if we take a break and then come back. So whether you want to deliver the mayor's report before the break or when we return, either is fine with me. But
Do you want to just do it before?
Sure. Okay. Okay. And we just have the 2 appointments as well.
So I have a couple of appointments for council's confirmation tonight, all to the Historic Preservation Committee, to the Historic Preservation Commission, excuse me. I'm looking to appoint Emily Worthy to a 1st term, David Christensen to a 9th term, and Alexandra Kostick to a 3rd term on the Historic Preservation Commission.
Move approval.
Second. Motion's been made by Councilmember Williams and a second by Councilmember Huffman. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. Seeing none, that passes 7-0.
And then for council's information, I will be appointing Shannon Laws to a 2nd term on the Community Development Advisory Board. And that's the end of appointments tonight.
Great. And do you want to deliver the mayor's report?
Sure.
This time? Sure.
I'll just do it from here tonight. I was asked by our good friends at the Bellingham Food Bank to share the information that they are hosting a town hall tomorrow night, July 14th, between 6 to 7 p.m. at the Walking Museum, and there is a remote attendance option. The topic will focus on local produce and hunger relief. So if anyone is interested, you can go to the food bank socials or reach out to them for additional information about this important topic. And later in tonight's meeting, council will consider a resolution to put a measure before voters that eliminate the requirement that the mayor be the highest paid salary employee of the city of Bellingham. And this is a unique salary setting approach that has long been embedded in the city's charter, and it requires a vote of the people to change it. Our proposal, discussed in the Committee of Whole this afternoon, calls for the mayor's compensation to be set by the same salary commission that sets all of yours, the City Council's salaries. I wanted to share tonight that if council approves the resolution to go before the voters, I will absolutely be volunteering to raise my hand to write the pro statement, and I would invite any of you, if you are so interested, to join me in that effort. And last but not least, it has been an incredibly busy week and a few weeks of summer in Bellingham with multiple community events to choose from. Certainly World Cup has been delighting many of us. And over the weekend, it was Pride Weekend in Bellingham. And I would like to offer my sincere thanks to the many volunteers, the businesses and nonprofit organizations that bring this joyful and important event to our city, with special thanks to Pride in Bellingham. Pride honors the identities, contributions, and the dignity of our LGBTQ+ community, while recognizing the history of discrimination and vital ongoing work towards equal rights. Pride events help build community, visibility, and acceptance, and the city is very proud to be a primary sponsor of this event. Last weekend also featured Northwest Tune-Up Bike and Music Festival, 3 days of world-class mountain biking, live music, connections, and more. And it is also supported by the city and fueled by Pacific Northwest Spirit. The Leonard Streets neighborhood threw a party on Saturday and invited the whole city to come for some summer fun at their first annual Letterfest event. Downtown Sounds kicked off their month-long block party last week with free live music every Wednesday for the next 4 weeks with local food, drinks, and all ages fun. And also taking place right now is the incredible Bellingham Festival of Music. It's one of America's premier virtuoso orchestra festivals, and it is underway, featuring a range of performances by acclaimed players. There's truly something for everyone going on right now, and I hope to see all of you out enjoying all that Bellingham has to offer this summer. And that's the end of Mayor's report tonight.
Thank you very much, Mayor Lund. And prior to the break, we will also cover just council assignment reports. So this is a standing time for council member reports from assigned committees, boards, and other groups. I wanted to start with an item actually from earlier in the day. We drew names to assign the representatives from council to serve on a member of the lobby team that will be working during the upcoming legislative session. I just wanted to bring those names forward at this time for a formal vote, since similar to our reorganization meetings when we vote on those assignments, and since this will be an assignment that perhaps will be reported out during this time going forward. So I would move forward the names of Councilmember Williams, Lilliquist, and Cotton to serve on that lobby committee.
Second.
Motion's been made by the chair and a second by Councilmember Anderson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, seeing none, that passes 7-0. Councilmember Lilliquist, did you have an item?
Yeah, this is sort of a joint report out on behalf of myself and Councilmember Hamel. Back in April, we were assigned to a planning committee to explore the idea of a regional fire authority. A regional fire authority is an independent government organization that's composed when you merge more than one fire district or a fire district and a fire department. It's been explored in the years past. It's being explored again. That planning committee consists of myself, Dan Hamel, the Mayor Lund, and the 3 commissioners of Fire District 8. And for this thing to actually form, it's a new government entity that has to be voted on the ballot. So the people decide whether to create this new fire district. And what that would mean is that most of the assets and the employees of the city fire department would transfer to this new entity. And the same thing with Fire Commission 8, they would transfer to the new entity. So far that we've discussed the various need statements about needing to achieve adequate and sustainable funding for fire service in the community. We've discussed jurisdictional boundaries, governance issues, operations and services, and the organization and administration that entity might take. A lot of the factors in the Regional Fire Authority are actually templated in state law. They tell you how to create one. They give you ranges for ways they can be governed. And I just want to report out to other committee members that we're well along in that work. And I've been informed that the administration at some point will bring forward an update for us as well on how that work is going. And I thought the community might also want to be reminded that that's ongoing work and a possibility that might be on the ballot sometime next year.
Thank you very much. Any other reports? Councilmember Hamel?
Yeah, just so in the vein of fire, I serve on the EMS levy committee as well as the EMS oversight board along with the mayor and others. On the levy component, I can report that we are moving along towards a 2028 levy. For those that might remember, there was a voter approved twice now for EMS, and that provides funding for advanced life support, basic life support, community paramedicine, and training. And I'll continue to update as we get closer to the time when that's going to be up in front of voters.
Thank you, Councilmember Hamel. Councilmember Hutzman?
Thank you, Council President. So for my assignment with Bellingham Tourism Commission, just some initial reports about Bellingham Fan Zone and FIFA events, which I know everybody was very curious how that was actually going to turn out for Bellingham. So the official Bellingham Fan Zone website, run by Visit Bellingham, had more than 53,000 visits as of July 12th. So lots of activity on the website for information. The watch parties have been a great success. I think, let's see, at the last meeting, I wrote down that the commercial street party had 1,800 visitors. Trackside, I think for the first event, had 7,000 people in the area. Granted, this was also graduation weekend and the circus was in town. But a lot, and 1,500 of those were from 50 miles away or more, so quite a few visitors. And the Trackside second day was 4,800 people and 1,500, again, from 50 miles away as well. So great news that people were coming into town for those events. Personal vehicles head south, crossing into Whatcom County from all ports of entry in June of this year was up approximately 13% compared to last June. Great news on that front. Although, while this is positive, June 2026 crossings were still down 22% from June 2024. And there should be a more comprehensive report probably in the fall with more specific information. And that's all.
Thank you very much. Any other reports? Okay. Seeing none, we are going to take a 10-minute break. We will reconvene at 9:20. Okay, thank you very much. Welcome back. We're going to move forward with committee reports. If you'd like to stay, please feel free to have a seat. And if you do not want to stay, we hope you'll join us next time. Thank you very much. Okay, so at this point in the meeting, we are going to move forward with committee reports from the daytime. The first committee to meet this morning was Public Works and Natural Resources. That committee is chaired by Councilmember Lillquist, so I will turn it over to him at this time.
Thank you very much, President Stone. Let me turn my page. So Public Works Natural Resources Committee includes myself, Councilmembers Anderson and Cotton. We met at 10 a.m. this morning. We considered 2 items. The first of that is a contract award for a citywide non-motorized project, otherwise known as Project ES 572, bid number 33B 2026. This project consists of improvements across 10 locations in the city that will make walking and biking safer and more comfortable. This basically, we combine all these projects together to get one bid and get the work done faster and cheaper. The city publicly opened 7 bids on June 16th of this year, and Ram Construction General Contractors was the responsible bidder who submitted the lowest responsive bid of $1,480,017.15, which includes sales tax. The engineer's estimate was higher than that, closer to $2.1 million. Because of the scale of the project, it will include an apprenticeship hour requirement. Project engineer Jessica Bennett discussed the project. It includes both some bike lane and ADA ramp improvements, and several, I think there's 7, I think it's 7 of the those rapid rectangular flashing beacon crossing enhancements are also included. Anything else I might want to mention? The projects help implement the recommendations of both the city's bicycle master plan and the city's pedestrian master plan. This afternoon, the committee unanimously recommended to approve this, so I move to award contract number 33B 2026 for citywide non-motorized project to Ram Construction General Contractors in the amount of $1,480,017.15.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Lillquist and a second by Councilmember Cotton. Any discussion? I just wanted to mention, I know it didn't come up during the committee meeting this morning, but I think there was reference a bit earlier about the Safe Streets Bellingham, the campaign that we've heard from members supporting that campaign right now and sort of their advocacy efforts, which sounded like sort of a direct application of this funding, right, for non-motorized projects, and sort of substituting these, I'm going to forget the acronym, for the lighted beacons at crosswalks for those other proposals. And so just wanting to make note that, this project is one of those pieces that the city is moving forward with in connection with support for, multiple plans that have been put in place for a long time, that these projects have been on the sort of on the list for completion. And so I am hopeful that, the positive impacts from this particular project will be, seen by the broader community, and will also address some of the, safety concerns and other just desires that this particular Safe Streets campaign is also advocating for. So I believe that there's some, positive overlap there, but just wanted to make note of that since I believe that this is one of the pots of money that they've spoken to about being able to utilize. So, thank you. Any other discussion? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. Seeing none, that passes 7-0.
The second item we had was consideration of a resolution updating the fee schedule for the public use of city-owned electric vehicle charging stations. Our climate energy manager presented it. Actually, he discussed several things, not just the rate setting. One, he presented data on the use of the city's EV charging stations, and as you can see this, you see that it's gone up sharply, which makes a lot of sense. You put in more EV chargers, they're used more. They're proving themselves to be very successful. In addition, other topics that were discussed had to do with staff working on establishing requirements and standards for what's called over-the-curb charging. Let's say you need to run an extension cord out to your car because that's how you charge it at your own home. Well, how do you run an extension cord safely across a public sidewalk? So now there's standards about how those are covered so they don't create a tripping hazard or get in the way of bicycles. Also discuss the EV charging pilot program that the mayor mentioned earlier. This will be a pilot program to create a small pool of electric vehicles that will be hosted at several locations around the town. I think one includes the Food Co-op and Opportunity Council and another nonprofit in town. And these are available to, of course, any employee or shopper at those locations, but they'll actually be open for any member of the public to basically reserve an EV car to share those EV car use. And that program was funded by a grant that the city received. And then finally, to pivot back to the EV charging rates, right now the current rates that we charge, we're slightly losing money to the tune of $11,000 a year. The intent was never to make money, but also wasn't to lose money. Staff has recommended revising the rates. They did some market studies and showed that for level 2 charging, our rates are about in line with the market. We're not going to change those. But for fast charging, for level 3 charging, we were charging below market rate, and so we saw room for increasing the charge rate to 40 cents per kilowatt hour for using the fast chargers, which is still below the average market rate. But that would be enough basically to turn our EV charging program from the red to the black and therefore cover those costs so there wouldn't no need for a public subsidy to run these public charging stations. And so in order to create that new rate structure, there is an attached resolution. This afternoon, the committee unanimously recommended to approve that rate resolution, and I so move.
Second. Motion's been made by Councilmember Lillquist and a second by Councilmember Huffman. Any discussion? I was just going to note, you spoke to the EV car share. Those locations are Bellingham Food Co-op, Resources, and the Opportunity Council. So, anything else? Okay. All in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, that passes 7-0.
End of committee report.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Lillquist. The next committee this morning was Community and Economic Development. That committee is chaired by Councilmember Cotton, so I'll turn it over to him for a report.
Thank you, Council President. We had one agenda item and all council members were present. This is an ordinance to amend Chapter 6.04 of the BMC, Bellingham Municipal Code, to expand the Urban Village Phase Tax Credit and establish a new downtown pedestrian core tax credit. So this is a local business and occupation tax credit for new businesses. And the proposed ordinance expands the existing B&O Urban Village tax credit to all the urban villages in the city. And then also establishes a new targeted B&O tax credit program for qualifying businesses located within the downtown pedestrian core, so the most walkable part of downtown. The purpose of the ordinance is to provide for consistency in economic development policies within all the urban villages and incentivize the occupancy of vacant spaces, strengthen downtown economic activity, and improve overall vibrancy within the city's primary pedestrian-oriented district. Great questions, and I just want to thank the mayor for your leadership with your recent executive order, and this is an exciting step. to use one of the tools we have. So there was a unanimous recommendation to adopt the proposed ordinance, and I so move.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Cotton and a second by Councilmember Williams. Councilmember Lillquist.
I strongly in favor of this ordinance, and I appreciate the mayor bringing it forward. We do have limited tools for direct business support, and one of the most difficult phases for any business is the first few years. So these B&O tax credits are just for first new years for new businesses, not another business who just changed location within the city. So these are for new startups. If you have a startup business of any sort within the downtown the pedestrian core, you can get a small tax break on your local B&O tax, and also the same B&O tax credit already existed for urban villages. I would like to introduce an amendment, which is that when we established the urban village tax credit, we did it in a needlessly complicated way with a phased approach and different percentages, and it's more complicated, and it's already a kind of a small incentive, and I think it needs to be a cleaner, simpler, better incentive. And so I would ask that we harmonize our language to be the same kind of simple language. Right now, for the ordinance says for the pedestrian core tax credit, it says the credit shall be 100% of the tax due for the first 7 years. Rather than a phased approach, I would move that BMC 6.04-105A1 be amended to read the credit shall be 100% of the tax due for the first 3 years. That's a motion.
Second. Motion's been made by Councilmember Lillquist and a second by Councilmember Williams. Councilmember Huthman.
Michael, thanks for bringing this forward. I think it's an interesting discussion, all for simplifying our code where we can, where it makes sense.
Complex simplicity.
Yes, decomplexicizing. I would be interested in hearing from the staff their reflections on this proposal. How often is this used? How often would we potentially be seeing this exemption used in the future? And budget implications.
Yeah, Forrest Longman, Deputy City Administrator. I know when we polled how many businesses were currently using this, I believe it was 5. So it has not been super highly utilized in its current format, and I used to manage the B&O function in the city, and I can say it's never been particularly highly utilized. So I got together with finance earlier this afternoon, and they didn't think it would have a meaningful impact on revenues to make it a 3-year 100% credit for the rest of the urban villages. So minimal budget impacts, probably offset by potential sales tax revenues or other business activities. So no concerns from that standpoint.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the first 3 years of a business are certainly the most difficult, and and hearing that it wouldn't have major budget impacts, it could have huge beneficial impacts for a business where every dollar counts those first couple of years. So I'm supportive.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. I appreciate hearing those numbers, because when I first learned this might be coming forward, I wasn't extremely supportive, because it's a curveball. I'd like to know what the numbers are, what the impacts are. And I also wasn't extremely comfortable that there was no shelf life or a review where it would come back to us. I always worry that as right now with the economy not being good, there's not a lot of new business startups, but the pendulum swings the other direction eventually. And I guess I'm just uncomfortable that if in 5-10 years, it swings the other way. We have a lot of businesses starting up, and there is potentially an impact that it's hard to claw things back. So not having a sunset or a period of time, and I don't want to wordsmith here, but a period of time to do a look back where it reports back that, one, is it working? 2, what are the financial impacts based on what's happening? And then do we need to make an adjustment? Not knowing those, it makes me uncomfortable voting for it. Not that I'm against it, I just kind of feel like there's too much of an unknown for me just to agree to it. So without some sunset or a surety of a review at a certain point of time, I'd have a hard time voting yes.
Mayor Lind?
I think those are fair points to raise. We've talked a little bit about the urban strategist position. That will be part of their duties, is monitoring the impacts to the good or potentially bad as these play out over time. We anticipate it will be far and away mostly good. And it will be part of their job to promote. Having only 5 businesses avail themselves to the existing incentives is a strong data point for us that we're not doing a great job communicating the existing incentive structures. So as we're out there trying to say Bellingham is open for business, this position will really be amplifying that message and thinking about how are we communicating and making sure that businesses are aware of all of the resources that they have and that we're structuring for them, and then paying attention to how that's playing out. So,
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Councilmember Lilliquist.
I forgot to include in my motion a suggested change to the title. The title refers to the Urban Village Phase Tax Credit. I think we should just strike the word phased in the title of the ordinance.
Is that amendment acceptable to Councilmember Williams? You were the second. Okay.
Thank you.
So it's both.
It was basically an oversight.
It was in the written materials that were presented.
And does the clerk have a copy of that written motion? Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on the proposed amendment? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay, so that passes 6-0 with 1 abstention. Okay. Next, we will go, Councilmember Lilliquist?
Yeah, I'm a little bit uncomfortable doing this, but I think I need to do it anyway. One of the things that the administration has asked us is to be very clear in the council's requests for future actions by the administration.
Wait. I have to dispose of the main motion.
Oh, the main motion first, okay.
Is it, because this is not, your comment currently is not
No,
related
it's
to
relevant to this item, but it can be after the main motion.
Okay. So we have a main motion from Councilmember Cotton and a second by Councilmember Williams, so now as amended, which would be to move to approve the ordinance. Any further discussion on the main ordinance? Okay, seeing none, all in favor will say aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, that passes 7-0. Now back to you, Councilmember.
Yeah, I'm sorry for losing track of where we were. This has to do with what the mayor just referred to, that the new urban strategists, one of their jobs will be to monitor the impacts of policies like this one, negative impacts and hopefully mostly or all positive impacts. I made a request this afternoon. It was informal, and we're sort of trying to move away from that informal thing. So I'm going to make it formal, and I think it'll completely align with what the administration already is planning to do, is that I would move that we direct the administration to track the usage and results in terms of job creation, sales tax, customer use, and business numbers, and other similar measures, and report back to the city council at an appropriate time.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Lilliquist and a second by Councilmember Anderson. You have that motion written? Has that been shared with the
I got
clerk?
scribbles. I'll share my scribbles.
Any discussion on the motion? Is the motion understood by the full council? Okay. No discussion on the motion? Then all those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Or abstention? Okay, so that passes 6-1 with Councilmember Cotton opposed. Okay. All right, anything further on that item? I believe this is your committee, Councilmember Cotton.
End of committee report.
Okay. Thank you very much. So with that, we will turn to the next committee. The next committee that met this morning was Budget and Finance. That committee is chaired by Councilmember Anderson, so I'll turn to her for a report.
Thank you. We had one item before us today, and it was for information and discussion only. Agenda item 24987. We had a presentation today of which was provided a summary of the city's financial position for the first quarter in 2026. The March 2026 financial report was provided to us to the agenda bill and provide detailed information related to the first quarter. The presentation and additional information is available on the city's website at cob.org/reports. Our finance director, Andy Bjornson, basically reported out how the first quarter is going. Joining me during the session was Councilmember Hamel and Lilliquist, but I believe all council members were present. Not a ton of information because it's the first quarter, but some things that were to be expected is that some of our sales tax is down in the area of lodging, retail, and restaurants, which is one of the reasons why we're trying to work hard with incentivizing, helping new businesses and assisting our downtown core. But what was nice to hear was that we were bringing in more sales tax in the area of construction materials and things to do with automotive. So that helps balance and puts us a little bit ahead. We'll have a much more detailed report coming up in August where we'll have a better perspective of how the year is going. So far, a lot of our city departments are staying under or on budget with the exception of a couple, but that's because the beginning of the year there was some larger outgoing expenses like RG Haley site and such. So I think the information online might be a little bit more interesting than the video, but if anybody is curious how the city budget is currently the first quarter, definitely go to BT10 and you could watch the day session. But that would be all, and I look forward to August where we'll have a little bit better perspective of how things are going, and that was the end of committee.
Thank you very much. The next committee today was Parks and Recreation. That committee is chaired by Councilmember Williams, so I'll turn it over to him at this time.
Thank you, President Stone. At our meeting today, I was joined by council members Hamel and Cotton. And we had two items on our agenda. The first was an update on the Galbraith Mountain activities from the Whatcom Mountain Bike Coalition. The committee received the annual report from Eric Brown, Executive Director of the Whatcom Mountain Bike Coalition, and his report was more focused on the coalition's goals and key accomplishments in 2025, mostly regarding their work on Galbraith Mountain and working with other community organizations and many individual members of our community. The report covered areas such as the construction of 7 new trails on Galbraith, with a trail use of all of the trails of 308,609 community members. That's a large number. And that happened over 361 days in 2025. How they happened to accomplish all that was through a large number of programs serving over 700 participants in our school systems, such as after-school bicycle clubs, one called the Flying Squirrel Group, aimed at female students, but one that I focused on was one called Vamos, which is a program serving Spanish-speaking students over a period of 8 weeks, where the students get training in bike education, road safety, and community building, and at the end of the program, they earn a bicycle, helmets, and a lock. That was just a few programs that they offer out of 13. And The volunteer impact of that was 2,000 hours of trail work, 1,400 hours of event support, and 3,500 hours of program support. So as you can see, this is an active, productive organization which reaches significant parts of our community. The presentation was for information and discussion, so no action was taken, but I did thank Eric for the work that organization does to make this a continuing success for our community. So the second item was a contract award for indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity tree trimming and removal services, which was a bid numbered 12B 2026. The city solicited bids for an indefinite delivery quantity contract for tree trimming and removal services, and the work will be performed as needed basis over a maximum term of 3 years with an optional 1-year renewal, subject to not to exceed $450,000 for the initial term and $150,000 for an optional renewal year. The city received 3 bids that were publicly opened on April 15th, and Stumpy's Tree Care of Linden was a responsible bidder who submitted the lowest bid. And because of the scope of this project contract, the contract is not subject to the apprentice utilization program. So, the recommendation from Parks and Recreation staff was approval of the contract, and after a brief discussion by the committee, seeing no concerns, a motion was made and passed to award the contract to Stumpy's Tree Care of Linden in the amount not to exceed $450,000. And I so move.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Williams and a second by Councilmember Hamel. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. Seeing none, that passes 7-0.
And there was no further business before us, so we adjourned the meeting. And now I'm sending it back to you.
Thank you very much. The next committee meeting this afternoon was Public Health, Safety, Justice, and Equity. That committee is chaired by Councilmember Hamel, so I will turn it over to him for a report.
Thanks, President Stone. We had one item before us this afternoon. This is an interlocal agreement with Whatcom County for funding to maintain operations for the alternative response team. And this afternoon, I was joined by committee members Huffman and Williams. The Bellingham Police Department values the relationship with the alternative response team, or ART as it's more commonly known, while applying for a grant through the Criminal Justice Training Center, known as the Engrossed Substitute House Bill 2015 Public Safety Funding Program. The police department asked for $688,760 over a 25-month period to help maintain operations of the ART, retain trained personnel, analyze program data to preserve the unit's demonstrated benefit to the Bellingham community. So a combination of city and county funding as well as state grants have traditionally sustained the program, but as part of the last session in Olympia, the state legislature reduced the state's contribution, and this grant will replace that funding. This afternoon, the committee voted to approve, and I so move.
Second. Motion's been made by Councilmember Hamel and a second by Councilmember Williams. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, that passes 7-0.
End of committee report.
Thank you very much. So next this afternoon, we had Committee of the Whole. Just noting that all council members were present this afternoon. We had multiple items before the committee. The first was Agenda Bill 24973. This This was a presentation and consideration of the City Council Communications and Community Engagement 2026 Work Plan. So the proposed City Council Communications and Community Engagement 2026 Work Plan lays out recommended tactics for the council to consider implementing. These communications tactics are designed to increase and improve community engagement with the council. The work plan addresses priorities that council members identified at their April 20th, 2026 retreat. The City Council Communications Work Group provided input on the work plan and will help guide its execution. The City Council Communications and Community Relations Manager presented the work plan and outlined options for council to consider implementing in 2026. Just noting that this afternoon we had preliminary discussions and review of the proposed work plan. This item is being referred to committee, so to come back at our next meeting for further discussion. In the interim, tomorrow we will have our communications work group meeting to further review feedback from council, make some additional changes and edits, and then bring that back at the next meeting for further consideration and possible adoption. So at this point, no action was taken except to bring that back at the next meeting. So more to come on that. The next agenda item was Agenda Bill 24974. So this is a discussion of initiative number 2026-01, prohibiting algorithmic price fixing in the rental market. So the City of Bellingham initiative measure number 2026-01 concerns the prohibition of algorithmic price fixing in the rental market. The Whatcom County Auditor has verified that the petitioners collected signatures equal to not less than 10% of the total number of votes cast for the office of mayor at the last preceding municipal general election, that being 3,167 votes. In the work session today, Council discussed how to respond to the initiative as required by the Charter and the Municipal Code. The options before the Council include that the Council may enact the initiative as it is currently written, defer it to the voters at the general election in November, or reject the measure and propose an alternative measure that would appear on the ballot along with the initiative as presented. Council action must be taken by July 27th, 2026, which is our next council meeting, in order for that action to be forwarded on to the auditor's office to have the ballot measure prepared by the August 4th deadline to appear on the November ballot. If council fails for some reason to take timely action, then the initiative bill would be submitted by the finance director to the county's auditor's office for submission to the qualified electors for approval or rejection, again at the next general election. We did clarify this afternoon that there does not need to be a formal assignment or a vote for pro-con statements or authors of those statements, that step in the process will be handled by the administration. But we do need to have a decision, ideally at this point, just some direction to legal in particular about how we expect to proceed at the next meeting, just so that we can have that prepared for consideration at the next meeting. Councilmember Lillquist.
I move that we request the administration draft an ordinance that would refer and defer this matter to the voters.
We have a motion by Councilmember Lillquist and a second by Councilmember Hamel.
I believe I should have said prepare a resolution.
Great. I know the title only says initiative, but yes, the resolution would be moving the initiative that would ultimately be, I believe, an ordinance if passed by the voters. But so the motion before the council right now is to direct legal to bring forward a resolution that would, again, send this initiative to defer it to the voters for consideration at the next general election. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. Seeing none, that passes 7-0. Anything additional needed from staff or legal?
No, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay. So more to come on that at the next meeting. The next agenda item before the committee was Agenda Bill 24977. This is a resolution proposing amendments to Article 5, Section 2, and to Article 8, Section 6 of the City of Bellingham's Charter to allow the mayor or the mayor's designee to execute contracts in the name of the city and to eliminate the related requirement that the finance director attest the signature of the mayor. So this resolution would put a measure before the voters to streamline the city's contracting process and facilitate adoption of electronic signatures for city contracts. This includes two components. So first is allowing the mayor's designee to sign contracts and also removing the requirement for the finance director to attest to the mayor's signature and physically attach the city's seal. If passed by council, this measure would go before the voters at the November general election. So this afternoon, we heard from Deputy Administrator Forrest Longman, and just discussing at this time, electronic signatures and DocuSign is used and in fact required by the state for some contracts. So for example, a commerce contract or other items. And so really needing to align, again, the charter with the current practices. There was also discussion about how this would actually provide some additional, security, just thinking about the authenticity and the security measures that are put in place for things like DocuSign and other electronic signatures, in addition to just helping to streamline the process, thinking about the sheer number of contracts that the city, in particular the mayor, is reviewing and approving without having to physically shuffle papers from one office to another in sequence. DocuSign would allow all of those parties to review and potentially sign contracts simultaneously or in real time. So that was brought forward before the committee this afternoon, and there was a unanimous recommendation to move to approve the resolution, and I so move.
Second.
Motion's been made by the chair and a second by Councilmember Williams. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, that passes 7-0. The final item before the committee was Agenda Bill 24978. This is a resolution proposing an amendment to Article 2, Section 9 of the City of Bellingham's Charter to assign responsibility for reviewing and fixing the mayor's salary to an independent salary commission. So this resolution would put a measure before voters to eliminate the requirement that the mayor be the highest paid employee in the city. The current charter language results in a mayoral salary that is driven by staff salary compression instead of public intention. The proposed new language would have mayoral compensation set by the same salary commission that sets city council compensation, increasing transparency and aligning with best practices. If passed by the council, this measure would go before the voters at the November general election. So again, this is another item that would show up on the ballot this coming November. We heard from Forrest Longman, again, Deputy Administrator, this afternoon. And again, this is something that's been on the books in the charter for a long time, but had not been brought forward. So commending the mayor for bringing this item forward. I know she spoke to this briefly during the mayor's report as well. This afternoon, there was a unanimous recommendation from the committee to move to approve the resolution, and I so move.
Second.
Motion's been made by the chair and a second by Councilmember Huthman. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. Seeing none, that passes 7-0. Councilmember Lillquist.
So, Mr. I believe that the City Council has rare and limited opportunities to weigh in on ballots on the measure, on ballot measures. We can write a resolution suggesting an opinion to the voters. Is that true for city charter ballot measures as well? I know it is for ordinances that or other votes that have gone to the.
I'm sorry. I want to make sure I understand your question. It's pretty late. Can you?
Yeah, I'm sorry. So normally if there's something on the ballot, we're not allowed to use public resources and the city council is not allowed to, but we are allowed to do one thing with regard to items on the ballot, which is write a resolution asking, offering our opinion whether voters should vote for or against a particular ballot measure. Is that also true when the ballot measure is a charter amendment?
If I understand the question correctly, yes, the prohibition on using public resources to campaign for or against a ballot measure would apply equally to these proposed charter
And I'm
amendments.
saying it doesn't apply. I'm saying there's an exception, and that one state law exception is that we're allowed to pass a resolution.
Right, yeah, no, exactly, we're saying the same thing.
Same thing.
The
Okay,
general
good.
prohibition applies,
Okay.
but the exception also applies.
That being said, I'm wondering if the council would like to not only vote for a resolution to put these on the ballot, but also author and vote on a resolution to support voters approving them. If so, we could ask the administration to develop those resolution for both of these matters.
So if I can speak to that briefly, I think in other cases when there's something going before the voters that's not originating from the council or from the city, then maybe voters are unclear about whether there's support or not. And so a swaying in makes sense. To me, at least for these matters, these are basically being placed on the ballot by us, right? We're requesting these charter amendments, so I would hope that we're supportive. I can't imagine a case where we would be sending it to the voters asking for them not to change something, then we just wouldn't send it.
Well, but see, I can imagine we could say, let's just let the voters decide. We might have no opinion. I think it just would clarify things if we had a resolution that said, oh, by the way, not only do we think you should vote on it, we think you should vote yes on it.
So this afternoon, I believe the mayor spoke to her willingness to, serve as, so there will be a statement for and against for each of these items. And the mayor expressed her interest and willingness to participate in that support statement and welcomed council members to join her in that effort. So perhaps, we're just proposing that perhaps that's another way to address it, because if a council, if there's council representation, myself perhaps as council president, and the mayor writing in the pro side, does that accomplish the same?
Unless we vote, you can't speak on behalf of the city council, and neither can I. I can only speak on behalf of myself. I'd happily volunteer to join the mayor, but there might be other voices that could join the mayor on that pro statement that would be more diverse and influential and add more value. So even though I'd be happy to put my name to it, I think I'd be happier to put our names to a joint resolution. So, and if the same rules apply, I just think that would be a little extra step we could do. I'm not asking for something elaborate, but I think we should write short resolutions urging a yes vote, not just asking people to consider the issue.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion for both of these.
Second it.
So we have a motion from Councilmember Lillquist and a second by Councilmember Anderson. Discussion on the motion? Councilmember Anderson.
I don't think it hurts. It's a little extra step. Maybe it's needed, maybe it's not. But I think if it's voted unanimously, and I think sometimes a resolution can provide a little bit more information and background why there's support. So it gives us the ability to more than just say we think it should go to the voters, but here's why, as a united voice versus just in the voters' pamphlet. So I don't think it hurts to do it.
Any further discussion? Yes. Deputy Erb.
Thanks. I just have one quick recommendation. If you're going to vote to direct the administration to bring back these resolutions, that perhaps timing-wise, we do it, in like September, October, around the time that ballots are going out, might be more meaningful than July 27th, the next time we come back.
I agree. That makes sense. No specificity as far as the timing in your motion, right?
Motion did not include time specification.
Okay. Great. Anything further? Okay. Seeing none, are we clear on the motion? Okay, we'll call the question. All in favor will say aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, that passes 7-0. Okay. Any other items related to Committee of the Whole? No. Okay. We have old and new business. Any items for old and new? Seeing none. We also had several executive session items today. So in executive session, First was a potential litigation matter. This was with Herb. Staff provided information on a potential litigation matter. This was for information and discussion only, and there was no action taken. Next, there was potential property acquisition with Rosenblatt. Staff provided information on a potential property acquisition. This was for information and discussion only, and no action was taken. The third item was also a potential property acquisition with Rosenblatt. Staff provided, again, information on potential property acquisition for information and discussion only, and no action was taken. The fourth item was also a potential property acquisition with Rosenblatt. In this case, staff briefed council on the city's pending agreement to purchase a 1-acre property from Jeff Creightonpoth. The property is located in the Lake Whatcom watershed and is identified by assessor's parcel number 370421413350. The purchase price is $190,000. Closing is set to occur on or before August 7th, 2026, subject to council approval. The property will be acquired through the city's Lake Whatcom watershed land acquisition and preservation program, using restricted funds dedicated to that purpose. The program is funded by city water customers through a watershed surcharge on their utility bill. This is the proposed action: to entertain a motion to authorize the mayor to close the real estate transaction described in the city's executed purchase and sale agreement with the property owner, Jeff Creightonpoth, with the purchase price of $190,000.
Move approval. Second.
Motion was made by Councilmember Huthman and a second by Councilmember Hamel. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. Seeing none, that passes 7-0. Final item in executive session was a quasi-judicial matter, discussion relating to an appeal to the Bellingham City Council of SUB 2022-0011, VAR 2022-0002, and CAP 2022-0005 relating to the woods at Viewcrest. This item was discussed with Stamps. Legal counsel provided information concerning process and scheduling of the appeal. There was no action taken or further report at this time. That is the end of executive session. Next, we have consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion was made by Councilmember Lillquist and a second by Councilmember Williams. Any discussion or items to be pulled? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. Seeing none, that passes 7-0. Okay, next we have final consideration of ordinances.
Agenda Bill 24968, an ordinance relating to land use and zoning, extending interim zoning regulations to eliminate minimum automobile parking requirements and establish consistent bicycle parking standards citywide.
Move third and final.
Second. Motion was made by Councilmember Hamel and a second by Councilmember Huthman. Any discussion? Okay. Seeing none, and just to confirm, we did have a hearing earlier this evening that was considering permanent zoning regulation changes. This final consideration is again the interim zoning regulation that is being extended to allow time to finalize that separate process. So if there's no further discussion, roll call, please.
Holly Huthman.
Aye.
Dan Hamel.
Aye.
Skip Williams.
Aye.
Lisa Anderson.
Aye.
Michael Lillquist.
Aye.
Jace Cotton.
Aye.
Hannah Stone.
Aye.
The motion passes 7-0.
Thank you very much. Okay, so with that, that concludes the regular business. Again, our next meeting will be on Monday, July 27th. So as I mentioned, that concludes the regular business of the meeting, and we will now move to the public comment period. If you're watching live online or on BTV, the broadcast will now end. However, you can continue watching via Zoom at cob.org/CC Zoom, or listen via phone by dialing 253-215-8782 and entering meeting ID 871-5188-5205 and password 9. Again, that's cob.org/cczoom or dial 253-215-8782 and enter meeting ID 871-5188-5205 and password 9 to continue to watch or listen live. If you're watching a recorded version of this meeting, you can view public comment videos at meetings.cob.org.